For the delay in beginning on time. But I do want to welcome everybody, both in person and those streaming on YouTube. In partnerships with the tribes who called Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge the delay in getting on time. But I do want to welcome everybody, both in person and those. Right? Okay. My apologies, everyone. We're back in action. I just want to finish this tribute that we've added to the beginning of our board meetings. So I'm going to restart. In partnership with the tribes who call Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge and respect the land our schools are built on. We commit to being a strong partner with any and all tribal nations who entrust their children to our schools. We are grateful and honored to be partners. With that, I would like to call our governing board session for October 21st to order, please. Ms. Marion, may we have a roll call?
Yes. Jessica Bueno.
Here.
Carmen Trujillo.
Here.
Reggie Carrillo.
Here.
Dr. Alicia Vink.
Here. Wonderful. With 4 board members present, we do have a quorum and can proceed. As a reminder, this is a work study session, and these are opportunities for the school board to learn more about specific topics. No decisions are made at these study sessions, and opportunities for public comment are not included as part of the agenda. With that, can we move on to the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our adoption of the agenda, and it was brought to my attention that our board reports and requests and future agenda items were not included on this agenda. So I would like to include those items somehow throughout our meeting. So with that, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Jessica Bueno, so moved. Alicia Vingo, second.
Is everyone okay with moving forward with the agenda as it's presented, and then we will fit in our board reports and requests before we adjourn later on? Okay, wonderful, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. With that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to item A5, our in-kind services in ASU Preparatory Academy presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the governing board. I would like to welcome our friends from Arizona Preparatory Academy, who will be providing some information to us regarding the in-kind portion of our agreement, kind of a recap of what occurred last year, which is appropriate and within our lease document. However, we also have with us tonight counsel, Laura Server Blanco from Gus Rosenfeld Law Offices. She was with us when we drafted the last agreement, and because you are also new to this agreement, it would be appropriate to take a run through the document with legal to really kind of cover the highlights: term of the contract, who's obligated to do what, how we get to the in-kind, how the in-kind works in lieu of cash, and things like that. So, and Laura, I know that we called you kind of late, and it's kind of a pandemic trend that we're seeing here. So we appreciate you being here. If it's okay with the audience and it's okay with the governing board, in order of kind of precedent, I think we should discuss the actual document first and then move on to the in-kind portion, if that pleases the board. So Lori, you want to give us kind of the nickel tour of the ASU prep lease agreement?
Thank you. This agreement became effective September 24th, 2020, and the term began July 1, 2021. It's a 2-year, no, sorry, it's a 5-year term. And it's contingent upon each party having sufficient appropriated funds to make it work. Under this lease, rent for the first year was $500,000 with 2% increases each year during the term of the lease.
Hey, Laura, do you have any, can you just kind of call out the page numbers as you go through here so
Oh,
we
sure.
make sure we stay with it?
Yeah, section 3, page 2 is the rent. In addition, section 4 provides that we don't pay property taxes since the district owns the building, so no one has to pay property taxes. Section 5 is what we're really talking about tonight, and that's the in-kind services. And the ASU is proposing to provide to Phoenix L $118,750 per year in in-kind services. In-kind services mean payment in the form of goods or services that has value to the receiving party as measured by the reasonable market value for such goods and services. Now, there's an exhibit here, it's the second to last page, or it's the last page, but it's so small I cannot read it. So that's why I'm going to depend on the professionals to tell us what types of in-kind services are being provided and what their values are. And so this lease is set up too, so that a couple times a year, December and June, the parties will meet and see where you are as to the in-kind services, and if everybody's satisfied, if things need to change and things like that. And there's a dispute provision, so if the parties can't agree, they get together and talk it out. Okay, if ASU provides more than $118,750 in in-kind services each year, that value is carried over to the following year.
Hey, Laura.
Yeah.
So we all have a copy of an agreement dated December 13th of 2018, and it has $75,000.
That was the 2018 agreement. That lease.
So the one you're covering is the 2020 agreement.
2021
Okay.
started July 1, 2021.
And so the material changes between the 2018 and the 2020 really are the numbers.
Right.
So the kind of the context and the language between 2018 and 2020 remains, but the numbers have changed.
Right.
So then in that case, what we'll do is we will get the board a copy of the 2020 agreement. Mary, am I staying correct? So we will get you a copy of the 2020, which has the number changes, but the contractual language is the same. So if you wanted to, you could scratch out 75 and put 118. You can scratch out the date and put the correct date, and you'd have basically the copy we're going to send you tomorrow.
And I'm sorry, can you repeat that information then?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can you repeat the information that you shared earlier about the amounts?
Yeah, the rent is $600,000 starting in July 2021 per year. And it goes up 2% each year for the 5 years of the term. The in-kind services are equal to $118,750. That amount stays constant throughout the 5-year term. The parties are to meet twice a year to go over what's been provided and to evaluate the value of those services. And then they can decide what things need to change so that we stay on top of it. And then if they provide more than $118,750 in in-kind services in any one year, the excess value rolls over to the following year.
Also, Madam President, if I could add, even though we don't have the 2020 agreement here, in place, the discussion we're having tonight regarding in-kind services is still related to this particular lease. And the next year, when we have the same discussion, it'll be based on the lease agreement that we have, that was sent you a copy of. So the discussion today, as far as in-kind services, are tied back to this current agreement you have in front of you.
Thank you for the clarification. I was processing that and that made it much more clear. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Kivana.
Do we go through the balance of the lease, or are you just interested in those numbers?
Well, let's pause here for just a second, make sure that everybody's all caught up with the numbers. So what was the rent again, Laura?
600,000 a year, 2%
600,000 a year.
increases each year during the 5 years.
Okay, so it's got an escalator.
Right,
The in-kind amount of 118,000 is static,
that stays the same, correct?
stays the same throughout the 5-year lease term. And the end of the term is, what's the date?
June 30, 2026.
June 30, 2026 is the end of the contract term. And then I think you mentioned that the district and the prep will get together twice a year,
Correct.
formally.
Right.
I can tell you that informally, it's been more frequent than that, right? But formally, to really kind of conduct an audit and determine kind of the value of the in-kind, to ensure that the district is receiving kind of an equivalent value of in-kind services equal to or greater than 118,000.
Right.
Now, you mentioned that if it's 118, the balance would roll over to the next year.
Right.
What happens if it doesn't come up to 118?
I was just looking at it. So I have to look at it again. I thought maybe they'd have to make that payment of the difference, but I don't recall that. I'm not saying it.
Yeah, I can probably answer that question. I'm not sure what's in the actual legal document, but in practice, if there is a shortage in the amount for the previous year, it does get carried over to the following year. So if they provide the services, let's say up to $75,000 for the previous year, the portion that's not, that they don't provide the service for, it will be carried over to the following year.
So either over or under, to use our new betting term, right?
Right.
Either over or under, it would go to the following year. So that means an accounting needs to be done, which probably leads us back to the 2 formal meetings to determine what the over under is as we roll into the new year.
And that's the purpose of these 2 annual meetings, so that both parties can sit down and talk about what's actually been provided and what the fair market values of those services are.
Okay.
So to clarify, that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Sorry, so is that what we're doing tonight?
We're going to be
Going through.
recapping the whole year from last year. And ASU prep and in as much as the new CNI team can participate to go over the services received from ASU prep staff relative to the 118,000. So this is not one of those, it's not one of the stops. It's taking a look at all of last year. So this would be closing out, like the AFR, closing out last year's
Okay,
accounting for the time.
thank you.
Now, going forward, if the board would like to receive a couple of reports a year, kind of, at least maybe for a year or two, to kind of see, okay, well, where are we in relation to, either in kind or cash, right? And then, Mr. Keaton, I know it's always helpful to ensure some kind of board update or something that says we're actually receiving the rent payments. So maybe a little bit of an update to kind of square up this agreement, because it's a big agreement and because we all had to do so much to get to where we are. I think staying on top of this agreement is prudent. I think we should do that.
And the leases prior to the 2018 lease, both parties were not particularly good about keeping track of what services have been provided or what the values were. That's why we built in this mechanism for semi-annual meetings.
So then, as we move forward, we'll schedule some of those stops, probably to receive and discuss. And of course, we'll invite our friends from the prep to participate in those meetings as well. So we might want to think about what that schedule looks like in correlation to the kind of the governing board schedule. It's a great relationship builder anyway, right? So Laura, as we move on to page 3 here, what's the district's obligation and responsibility?
As far as maintenance of the building or anything else, okay. Prep pays all the utilities. And they pay for maintenance of landscaping, the premises and things like that. But the district actually provides some of it, so it's supposed to be compensated. So if you turn to page 6, section 10 of the maintenance and repair obligations. We said that the premises is being taken by issue prep as is because they had been tenants for 11 years prior to this lease. So they know exactly what the condition of the property is. Tenant is responsible for basic maintenance, keeping the tenant of the place in good repair, including landscaping, irrigation, light bulbs, light fixtures, signs, locks, closing devices, all fixtures and equipment used by tenant, whether installed by tenant or landlord, such as kitchen equipment and auditorium seats, all window sashes, casement or frames, doors or door frames. They're responsible for flooring if they need to replace it, if it's, wear and tear, if they need to replace carpet or tile or something like that. The district is responsible for structural type items, like the roof, the exterior walls, parking and structural elements, the structure, foundations, structural floors, structural supports, electrical, plumbing, septic, heating, ventilation, air conditioning equipment. And we have an accept on that. A few years ago, the district replaced all the air conditioning in that building at a very sizable cost, wasn't it? Several million.
$5.4 million.
$5.4 million. So since the district replaced the air conditioning HVAC units at its cost, in section 10D on page 7, it provides that if there isn't a manufacturer's warranty, the parties are going to split the cost to repair the HVAC system. That's unusual, but it's because we had such a big capital expenditure, and it was in 2016. Anybody have any questions about the maintenance obligations?
So Laura, let me understand this. So the prep pays for all the utilities,
Right.
Water, electrical, all of that. They also pay to maintain the grounds, right?
Mhm.
And grass, trees, things like that. The district's responsible for the structural integrity. The only major system the district's not responsible for is flooring.
Right.
And we're not responsible for any furniture, fixtures, or equipment.
No.
And so, and then if there is, after the HVAC units are out of the warranty period, the district and the prep will split the cost for any major repairs.
Correct.
Mhm. Okay, the other thing that we've done in practice, Mr. Quintana, and maybe you can help me out with this, is that using our school dude system, should we need to send a maintenance person to the prep to perform any work, the labor and the materials will be charged back to the prep. That's an old practice. I don't know that we're still doing that. Do you know?
Chris, yes. Chris, Director of Plant Services is here as well, and David, Bahama. They're the folks responsible for that practice, and it is continuing today, yes.
And so David, who does the billing for that? Okay, so if district staff did a light run or did a filter run, the prep would reimburse us in order to make us whole.
The district also has the ability to use the buildings if it needs to for, commencement ceremony or something like that, as long as it doesn't interfere with the ASU prep schedule.
Yeah, and I think, Laura, that goes all the way back to the beginning,
I think so too.
right? So for example, I know that ASU Prep has promotion and graduation ceremonies, but that campuses in and around the district who are having promotions that don't interfere with the schedule of the prep could possibly hold their promotional ceremonies there. I don't know that we've done that, but I know that's always been available to us, or professional development or anything. There's kind of an auditorium there.
Right. So you still own the building, so you can still use it as long as it doesn't interfere with their schedule because they are paying rent. And they have the right of quiet enjoyment under the lease.
Question, this is Carmen Trio. Mr. Quintana, what do those reimbursements look like? Like, as this has kind of gone over the last, since you've been here, I guess, does that happen often where money goes out and then that gets replenished?
For the repair services,
Yes, I'll say yes, I don't really know. I'm just wondering what those reimbursements or compensations look like.
yeah, so the, what happens after these services provided, the administrative tech, plant services, she will put together an invoice with the information of, with the repair that was done, and send a copy of that over to ASU Prep, and a copy of that will also go to accounting, so that we can, keep tabs of the receivables and then we get paid for that. So that happens, on a fairly regular basis. I can tell you that the last probably couple of years, we had some difficult times in getting to quick repairs of the facility in a timely fashion, but also I think with Mr. Chris Walford and the folks there, make some changes to the process. They improved the process. We worked with ASU Prep to improve the response time, and that has improved over the last year. And so it does. There's not a lot of repairs, but we do have some things that we work on and we build properly. We also had an issue about 4 months ago related to water damage and mold that we also addressed that within about a month's time. And so that was also fixed pretty quickly. And so right now the process is working pretty well. And they do pay the rent on time as well.
Thank you very much.
Another provision of this lease is that the tenant pays for all of its liability insurance. The district continues to maintain property and casualty insurance on the property at 100% of the replacement cost. Finally, there's one other provision that's a little different is if the district ever decides to sell that building, it will give ASU Prep a right to bid, which means it'll notify ASU Prep of its intention to sell. It doesn't give ASU Prep any preference. It specifically says it's not a right of first refusal. And that's because public schools in Arizona have a lot of constraints on them when it comes to selling property. So we're not tying our hands saying that we have to sell it to them, but they will certainly have a right to bid on it should the district ever decide to sell the building.
Do we know what the current value of the building is?
Mr. Quintana, my recollection is the last time we had that building assessed, which has been several years, and it wouldn't take into consider current market rates. It was 55 million.
I think at the time that was before we did the 2018 lease. So that was probably in 2017. And that was, I think, over 14.5 million, but that would not even be close to what it would be today.
I'd appreciate an updated number and just maybe like a quick couple sentences as to what it looks like when a school does sell something, just because I don't know.
So that's a great couple of questions, and it could be a work study all by itself.
I'm sure, but I just want the teeny tiny
So
version.
the shortened version is that anytime we sell property, we have to go to the voters to get approval, right? And then when we do a market study, we have to factor in the fact that it's a school and it's not necessarily business market rate. Sometimes that would put our square foot values higher, sometimes a little bit lower. I will say that that ASU prep, paying what they pay for the size of building that it is, they're getting the best deal in town. There is no lower square footprint that I'm aware of anywhere in the downtown area that's more competitive for the prep than the prep building.
Do they
Property on Fillmore.
work with us because they want to be a part of the community? I mean, my thinking is that if they wanted to build a building, ASU could certainly do that. So they work with us because they want to work as part of the community, or because they want a good deal?
I would say both.
Okay.
I would say that ASU Prep has gotten a really good deal for a really long time and saved an absolute ton of money by having some of the best real estate in the downtown area and one of the best school facilities in the downtown area.
Okay, I don't know if this question will take us off track from where we were, but has our partnership with them grown since we started leasing the building, or did we have a partnership before? Like, would we still have said partnership? That's kind of where my brain is.
So the original agreement predates me. I got here in
Okay.
2012. The original agreement came in 2009, let's say. And there was a lot of conversation around the building and the concept of the school and all of the rest of that stuff. And there's always been some dialogue about a relationship between the district and the prep. But as programs ebb and flow, as pillars of kind of academic, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, kind of academic direction goes, the district and the prep hasn't always been aligned. So there hasn't always been that opportunity to have kind of a cohesive or kind of a synchronous alignment with the prep, even with the in-kind services. The district did a lot of things in the early days to support the prep as they were growing in grade level through the 12th grade. And so the commitment by the district to the prep has been longstanding.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Someone last week.
I might have been totally wrong on that appraisal number, I'm old, and that was a few years ago.
No, I think the 14 million is a triple net.
That could have been the
I
lease
think
rate,
I think the 14 million is a triple net lease amount, right?
that could have been, yeah.
Because I'm thinking of, of course, the number that everybody remembers is 2.7 million, right?
Right.
Sounds like a commercial on TV. But that was the kind of a battle cry from the district at the time. And I do believe that even at that market rate was, that annualized lease amount was still better than market rate for business property at the time. And I believe that to this day.
So just referencing the concept, they're getting a good deal. So they're paying $600,000 plus the in-kind services of $118,000. So that's $718. And so what would be a reasonable price tag for the rent if they're matching competitor rates?
Well, I think if I understand your question, Reggie, it's what's the true value of the rent?
Yeah.
And 5 years later, to like Dr. Fink's point, you probably want to go out and do it again, right? You want to go out and get an assessed value of the property. There were a couple of analytics done at the time. We had John Loper, whose grandfather was a superintendent of this district, do our assessment. And at the time in 2015, 2016, it was that 2.7 million per year figure. And I wish Jackie was here. David, do you remember how many square feet of school space, not the land, because the land is what, 2 or 3, 4 acres, right? But the school space was, what was it, David? We'll give you a minute, right? But it's several thousand square feet. It's a big, big building. What page do you want, Martine? Oh, there it is. Thank
Do we have any representatives from ASU Prep here? I'm just wondering. What is your name? I'm sorry, what is your name?
In the 2020.
Carrie
please.
Wise.
Kenny Larson, okay, and then is there anybody else? From? Okay, thank you.
I've got 171,487 square feet on 14.81 acres.
14 acres, okay. So it's a big piece of land. It's a big building in some of the most expensive area of downtown Phoenix.
Right.
Okay.
Does ASU Prep have other properties that they rent, and what is the rental price that you're paying on those properties?
You know, I don't have access to that. We can check some realtors to see
Okay,
what that is from, I think when we took a look at it the last time, some of those numbers were fairly well locked down. I don't know that ASU has all of those numbers publicly available, but we can certainly ask again. It's been several years since I looked into it.
okay, thank you, Dr. Weeks.
In that request, can we also ask for any future projects?
Say again?
On top of Reggie's request, can we add of any forecast of future buildings that may be in our area that are gonna be built?
Oh, you mean by ASU, the university itself?
Yes.
Yeah, we can ask. Do you guys know, if you guys putting up any buildings? Is ASU putting up any buildings that you're aware of while you're here? We'll take a look at it. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have any other questions for me?
I would just hang tight for just a minute.
How do we measure those in-kind services? Can you give an example, Mr. Quintana, of an in-kind service and how we document that? I know that there was talk of like catching us up on that, but do we just have brief examples?
Yes, that's something we'll be discussing a little bit as well, but just to give some examples. Mhm.
Here was what was attached to the actual lease that was signed. I can't even read it. I can't read it. So.
Yeah, there are a couple of examples are they work with Garfield and Capital on a mentoring program. They have also a dual language team helping us out with also at I believe at Herrera.
What page is that, Mr. Quintana?
Yeah, it's part of the presentation that this part we're going to be going over as well on the issue prep presentation.
Okay,
It's and this particular one is sorry, there's no page number.
page 21, you said?
But it's the issue prep presentation that it's all on your packet.
So then we recently approved a research project happening, would that be an in-kind service? We assume it would
Could be
be, or-
considered an in-kind service if they looked at it that way. I don't know that they looked at it that way. I don't know that You mean, Dr. Montez and them?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know that they were gonna charge us anything for that support anyway.
okay, yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Dr. Gonzalez, did you have something?
Yes, those projects that are specific to ASU are separate from partnerships with ASU Prep. So ASU Prep is a separate entity from ASU in terms of our in-kind services.
Thank you.
So in general, Mr. Carrillo, the kind of the high level concept behind all of this relationship building between the prep and the district really it revolves around professional development for teachers, targeted supports for students. An example would be, I don't know, what was it last year when we were without a math teacher at Capitol? The prep provided digital, some of the digital math lessons for the students at that campus. And I think that might be part of the booking for the in-kind, I'm not sure, but that would be an example of where we had a need and ASU Prep was there to the ready to support us. So I would say that's a fairly good example of responding to something that we needed to get done in kind of short order.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. And do we make those requests to ASU? Usually when we were seeking an in-kind service?
The folks at the prep,
Yeah,
Gary and you know, and last year it was Dr. Battle. And so who's ever in charge of the prep would be our point of contact.
okay, so, and then right here is our point of contact.
These guests
Okay.
are our points of contact.
Okay, thank you.
Also, if I can add to that as well, that so we have John Kemper here, who's the Chief Financial Officer with the prep, and Carrie Larson, she's the head of schools at this point. And also want to mention that part of what's been transitioned over the years is that there was change in leadership both at the district level here, with Dr. McLaughlin leaving, and also Dr. Brown leaving, because they're the ones that they're the main point of contact when it comes to in-kind services that ASU Prep provided for us, and also Dr. Ann Battle, she left also ASU Prep, and so we have new leadership, both in at the ASU Prep side and also our side, and so that's part of the reason there's a little bit of kind of confusion about the full story of the work that was done that that we'll be covering today, but we're I think everything's been pretty well documented, so we'll be able to talk to it.
Okay,
Is it pretty common for a school district to hire another school district or school to provide services for them?
Yes, it's allowable under the Arizona Administrative Code for, I'm trying to remember the term, boy. But it's called, it falls under cooperative, it falls under the rules regarding cooperative purchasing. So for example, let's say we had a lot of weeds and there was only one grounds person in our area that was licensed to spray for weeds. We might all share, because you don't spray for weeds all the time. We might all share that resource among several school districts. That's pretty common. Murphy District just entered into agreement with Phoenix Union to provide transportation services to the students there. So the kind of the scope and shape of what the documents look like and the relationship look like, but school districts are encouraged to share resources when we can. And for this, we're so close and we have an expert knowledge of the building, because a lot of the guys have worked in the facility before. And it's a way for us to kind of keep an eye on things when our maintenance crews go in and they work on something, they might see something else. So there's some intrinsic benefit for us to have that. Now, the other thing I think it's important is that some work we can't do. So we would have to contract, some work out. And that would be brokered through us. We would hire the third-party contractor, send them over to the prep, and then I believe we would recover our costs that way. Like I'm thinking of the mold situation. We probably didn't do the mold remediation. Who did it? Dominion? Sagebrush and Dominion, so in that situation, you guys probably cut the purchase order, brought the guys out, and then received reimbursement from the prep for the work on the mold and I don't know where the water leak came from, the rain maybe? Into the auditorium, is it rain into the auditorium? A faucet, okay. So Dr. Vink, to answer your question, it is pretty common.
Okay, I guess I was thinking for the in-kind services, in my head, there was more of this collaboration where schools just shared things, but it's more of like an exchange of funds. We recognize that it costs money to share something with someone, so we pay you for that. We're not necessarily, the rates, the in-kind is, are we, I guess I'm trying to figure out whether it's a profit that they're making or whether it's basically an exchange of services where the in-kind rates are what it would cost them to give that. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
The in-kind services are valued at the fair market value of what those services are worth to you, the district.
Okay, so if they're charging us fair market value, then we should be charging them fair market value? Is that what I,
Right.
okay, just,
So I'll give you an example because apparently I'm the resident storyteller and historian. When I got to the district in 2012, we were providing transportation services to prep students, but we were only charging them for the fuel. We weren't charging them for
right,
the manpower to drive the bus or the maintenance and upkeep of the bus. And so when I went to the prep, after conducting an analysis of really what the per mile cost should be out the door, presented to the prep, they no longer wanted to work with us on transportation services. They went out and sought their own services, and they were within the right to do that. But those kinds of things were happening early on.
that's helpful, because that's what I was thinking, like, was happening, was where we're just helping each other. But if it's fair market, then we should be fair market.
It should be. This particular agreement is probably more transactional
Okay,
than any of the other agreements that we've had in the past.
okay, that's what I was trying to understand, was whether we are transactional or whether we are, I know that we want to build community and we want to work together for all kids, but also trying to wrap my head around the financial piece of it. So thank you.
Anything else? Anything else?
So, so the lease for 2021 it's been approved? Or like that's what we're talking about right now?
So the board's not going to vote on anything tonight, and we're not going to bring anything to you to vote until probably 2025 or 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, unless there is a need to dissolve the lease,
Mhm.
then we would bring that to the governing board.
Okay, thank you.
What are the conditions? Where is that in the lease for dissolving? Like what would
What
make
would
that happen?
constitute that?
Yes,
Well, I'll defer to Laura again, but if, let's say the prep no longer had the ability to pay the rent, right, I think that's probably the easiest one.
This lease includes typical default provisions, so if they fail to pay rent, if they don't perform their obligations under the agreement, they file bankruptcy, they assign, or the leasehold interest passes to another party by operation of law, so basically they're not the tenant anymore. If they don't provide the in-kind services, then they can cure that default by paying the difference. And they have to fully maintain the premises. So if they don't do any of those things, we have to give them notice and an opportunity to cure. And if they do not cure those, we can terminate the lease. That's a very standard lease term, commercial lease term.
So for me, just recapping the in-kind services, we don't yet have like a full document about 2018. If they fulfilled that amount yet, and so that's gonna be provided to us.
So that, all of that stuff went to that particular board. So that the prep fulfilled their obligation to present and provide information. I think it was probably a gap during the pandemic, probably in 2020, right? which is kind of why we're here, kind of recapping last year. But annually, the prep and the district were pretty good about bringing the information to the governing board and presenting it. So it should be matters of public record, either in board docs or sitting around someplace, right? In minutes somewhere. I know Dr. Bell presented it at least once, maybe twice, on kind of where we were with in-kind services, right, when she was in charge over there. So it's been standard practice for prep folks to show up to the governing board meeting at least once a year to provide an update on the in-kind and to really talk about some of the years where they were talking about where they were with grade levels and, you know, kind of providing additional information, because it's really based on your interest and what you want to hear from the folks at the prep. They're happy to share with us whatever we would like to know.
And the in-kind services right now is the only thing, not that we're deciding on anything tonight, but the only thing that we would not change the amount, but change which services it was before the 2025, 2026.
No, the in-kind exercise goes every year.
Right, yeah, so that's the only thing that we would be able to change about this.
You would probably have some input if you'd like, but we don't bring it back to the governing board for approval.
Oh,
That
I
this is the in-kind that we're going to be doing. It's handled administratively.
Okay.
And it's the team is the CNI team, Dr. Gonzalez, Teresa, and I don't know who else you have on the team, right? But we have our team, and ASU has their team, and everybody gets together and they kind of they ask us, what's your need this year? And then we say, okay, well, we're working on this and that and the other. And then we try to figure out ways to dial in some in-kind services. So for example, last year, where's Linda? Last year, we had a conversation with the folks at, what was that department? Kind of the audio visual department, right? And we were gonna make some commercials or, you know, provide some, and that didn't work out. But at least we had the conversation, you know, ASU prep through ASU made the offer, and they have all the good equipment, you know, and all of that. And, but there were some nuances that just kind of caused that project to fall apart, you know, logistics and timeliness and priorities and things. So that happens, and when that happens, you just pull that line off the list. We renegotiate what a replacement in-kind service might be. So some of this in-kind can get a little fluid throughout the course of the year, based on what we need, what's available, and how fast stuff can be turned around.
Okay, so this is purely informational until 2025, 2026.
Correct, and in 2025, 2026, we're actually going to be talking about the big lease.
Right.
Whether or not we want to continue, you know, leasing the building to ASU Prep. That would be the big ticket.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Now I've got a question. This is Carmen Trujillo speaking. So to Dr. Bean's point, would the answers to her questions, her implied questions right now, as far as the programs and the actual services that we're getting, would those be included on the updates we were talking about earlier?
Yes. So, you know, what we would like to do is, if you want to engage with, you know, some more of the detail of our relationship with the prep, we would schedule some board updates that would provide that information. So for example, if you wanted some quarterly reports, you know, some assurance that they're paying the rent, where are we in terms of the in-kind services, in terms of the booking of $118,000, where do we think we are? Are we at 50, are we at 60, are we at 70, whatever, you know, we could do stuff like that.
I'm kind of more so just gearing towards what data we have to show that it is what our kids need, and not just the discretion of, oh, let's try this kind of a thing. I guess really understanding where those decisions are getting.
They're really
made.
academically focused. So, you know, we rely on the professionalism of our own CNI team to determine the need. And then collaborative kind of, you know, shared language with folks over at the prep. You know, they kind of academic folks kind of speak the same language. And so, but in terms of answering the question, did what we do increase student achievement? That is the analysis that we're going to run this year to determine whether or not the in-kind services, because now we're coming out of COVID, we're moving into more digital distance learning and things like that. We're kind of at a place where we're not fighting as many fires. So this would be a good time to take a look and say, okay, well, you know, what is the value of the 118,000? It's a booked value based on, you know, the formula of hourly rates, people's time and effort and things like that, right? That's from a financial accounting perspective, kind of labor is what we're being charged under the in-kind, but the intrinsic value to students, I think, is what you're asking.
Yes.
And so kind of like a program evaluation to determine whether or not this relationship of in-kind is really working out for kids.
Yeah.
That's kind of the analysis that the CNI team went to do this year, from my understanding.
Okay, that's where my head started going a little up there. So thanks for pulling me back down. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Dr. Weeks, so at this point, would ASU come up and?
Yes, how about we
discuss-
make some introductions to our
Yes,
friends at
please.
ASU Prep.
Since everybody's new.
So we want to thank you for being here tonight. We've had a lot of conversation. This board is very new to this lease agreement. And I want to thank board members for asking lots and lots of very important questions.
Yes, welcome. Thank you guys very much for being here. Welcome to the team.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Nixon, Phoenix Elementary School District staff. We're excited to be here, talk to you a little bit about last year's in-kind. My name is Carrie Larson. I'm the head of schools for ASU Prep's brick and mortar. We also have a head of schools for our digital school. And
Hi, thanks for allowing us this opportunity. My name is John Pepper, I'm Chief Financial Officer for ASU Prep.
and I know Mr. Quintana mentioned this as well. We are going to do our best to answer any questions you have about last year. I am new in this position, so I'm really operating off of meeting notes and our documentation from last year. And similarly, Dr. Gonzalez is new, so she's a little bit in the same position, but we're happy to take down any questions we can't answer, share any responses with the board secretary so that answers can get to you if we can't get them to you tonight. We just want to make sure we're letting you know everything that we can. We're just going to walk you through a little bit of last year's in-kind services, a little bit about where we're at this year. And then I think like we've already talked about, maybe we'll set some more board updates that we can come to. So first off, this is a sort of a quick summary of a few of the things that were done last year on the first page of your, I guess the first page with real content on it. We do have the one reminder. Last year was a part of the 2018 lease. So the number we've been talking about, this $118,000 number, that's this year, applies to this year and going forward. Last year was the last year of the old lease. And so the in-kind number was $75,000. So I actually think that's the lease you have in your board packet. So that's the one that's relevant to FY21. So I'm going to talk through just a couple of the services. You can also ask questions after each slide if you want. If you want to kind of hear what they are, I can double back to slides again at the end and touch on anything again. So one of the big items was digital course enrollment. So there were 58 students at Capitol who took 8th grade math, I think most of them at least were 8th grade math enrollments through the year from ASU Prep Digital. So there was a ASU Prep Digital teacher who met with students, taught the class, graded the class. And that was one of the big services. It's to check at the end, I'm sure it's $250 per enrollment. So this is a pretty $275. This is a pretty big ticket item when we get to the end and sort of look at the add up. This was one of the bigger items from the in-kind services last year.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Back to the math digital courses, did we take any surveys and baseline to see where our students were at the time that they were going to take these classes and then after what the result was?
Yes, I don't have that with me tonight, but we do have that. We use an adaptive math tool called Alex that would have given them all a baseline test at the beginning when they started. I don't actually know the length of the enrollment, if it was the whole year or not. If it was the whole year, there would have been a mid-year assessment and then an end-of-year assessment.
Thank you.
So, one of the other bigger items is working on rolling out mastery-based grading with the Phoenix Elementary School District team. I got to work on this team actually in my previous role. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time working with a lot of your principals and district leaders. And then we also got to work a lot with the EDA school with your team there. It was a great team. Some of the meetings they even had students at it so that we could talk to students about grading and what mastery-based grading was like. It was a really fun project, but it was all focused on how can we shift grading from did you do it or did you not to did you learn it or did you not? And that's something, you know, all teachers are trying to do all the time, but there's some, you know, procedures and policies and things we can put in place to help make sure our grades are really a measure of learning as opposed to, you know, a measure of did you do your homework every night? Because we all know kids who don't do their homework every night, but perfectly understand sixth grade English. And so working on, you know, how do we find that balance?
Can you define multiple? Do you have a number of how many sessions were actually done at EDA?
We do, we can grab it on the detail. I think it's in your packet, actually, the detailed list, but we can come back to that so you can see how many sessions are over. I was not the second half of the year of sessions. I was on maternity leave, but there was a team from prep who kept the session. Another project, I wasn't involved as much with this one, but still happy to take questions that we can come back to and answer, even if I don't know the answer, was support for the dual language program at EDA specifically. And so that was focused on classroom visits and some professional development sessions, a few things for all teachers, most things focused specifically on dual language teachers. School design, this was a little bit of background work that we did, starting to get ready to do some help with signature school building. And this was something that in the end was put on pause. Then sort of the planning started up again, but then in the end, the decision was just that it wasn't support that Phoenix Elementary School District needed. So there was some background planning work done, a few meetings done with network or district level staff, but this isn't something we fully completed. So we'll see that when we look at the breakdown. And that's mentioned too, that it was one that we started, but didn't end up completing that project.
And do we have access to what was completed?
Yes, we do.
Is it this slide?
This is just one artifact for you guys, but yeah, we do have the rest of it too.
Because I'm kind of projecting that it fits into the pathways for success. Do you agree?
Okay.
Do you think so?
For sure.
Do we know how often that has happened where we've kind of chosen something for in-kind services and then it didn't work out or we didn't use it or?
It's hard to give a rate of success and because it's also, there's some things I don't think it's very often where we really start something and then stop it. There's a lot of like talking about something, having a meeting or two and realizing it's not what's right. I would say it's more rare for it to be something where it's like this that we may get away with.
Okay, thank you.
Another piece was teacher coaching at Garfield and Capitol. So you can see sort of a breakdown here of what happened at Capitol. It was a very small program. There were 2 teachers involved and they each participated in 1 coaching session. At Garfield, there was a little more engagement with the coaches. There were 6 teachers. All together, those 6 teachers got 18 sessions. And the teacher level of engagement, varied a little bit. Some teachers came for 2 and some teachers came for more like 4 or 5 sessions. And then you can see here sort of a list of what was happening in those coaching. It was a lot of focus on thinking about last year being the pandemic, using tech tools and student engagement as part of preparing and continuing to teach virtually.
I want to ask, can we find out if those teachers are still with us in the district?
I'll just pause for a second. On the next page is just a breakdown for one single teacher of what their coaching sessions look like. And then next up, there were a few things that were a little smaller and some of which actually were kind of these, we started some things, but then didn't end up using them. The social emotional needs consultations, there were a few of those meetings, and some, I think they managed to share enough in those meetings that there was an offer for someone from our team to come out and lead some professional development. But in the end, it was decided sort of through the meetings and the resources she shared in the meetings, the Phoenix Elementary School District team had what they needed to lead professional development with the team. And then there were also some planning meetings to help get ready for iAcademy and the iAcademy launch. On the other two sides, video services and some mentoring calls coordinated with the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College team. Those were both things that were short-lived in just a few meetings and actually are not counted, there's no dollar amount associated with them in kind, but it was, some meetings done by the ASU prep team. And so you'll see some of these things in the tracker where when we get to the final cost is actually zero. The video services turned out it wasn't what the Phoenix Elementary School District team needed. And so those meetings, there's no cost associated with those meetings. So I'll give you a second with this last page to look, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions, but I'll first just sort of tell you what you're looking at. So we've got a summary on the left side of what the in-kind service was. On the next one is what's a comparable service. You see CAM Solutions on there a lot. It's a consultant group that we've worked with at ASU Prep. And so we used what they have been charging us per day and per hour as a market rate in a lot of cases. The last column is probably the one that matters to you most. That's the dollar amount that was charged to Phoenix Elementary School District through in-kind. Not actually charged, but that was the roll-up for in-kind. It is blocked, so I do want to point out to the team, the total for last year is $59,425. And if you remember back to the beginning, the goal was $75,000, which does mean we were short for in-kind last year. So there is a roll forward cost associated. So we will owe $15,795, something like that. I have the exact number that we'll owe this year in addition, since the $75,000 mark was not met last year.
I'm sorry, can you clarify the first item, meeting between ASU Prep and our district?
Yeah, so actually, as a part of the lease, is that you can charge for the time of the people at the meetings. And so that is the charge for the planning meetings that happen throughout the year.
And does that mean that that's the meetings where we convene about reviewing like the in-kind services?
Yeah, not the meetings, actually, I should double check. That's the meetings, I think it's mostly the meetings that are had between the prep team and the Phoenix Elementary School District academic team, the academic groups meeting.
So it's kind of to set up this like coaching and
Yeah.
just kind of develop the plan of like what the in-kind
Right,
services
what are we
will look
gonna
like.
do, which things are we discontinuing, what are we continuing, what new things are we starting, yeah.
But that means that we don't get our time reimbursed, right?
I don't think so, we can double check what it says in the lease.
But this isn't the least that you guys can charge us for meeting with you.
So that is part of managing the contract and managing the in-kind portion of the contract. And I know that's something else that the team is looking at this next year as we're looking to be more transactional. I would say that last year was kind of a pandemic bust year. I don't know that anybody was really paying as much attention to the in-kind listing with the kind of detail that we needed to. But I do know that there's some newness to this, and so my expectation would be that. So we have a balance of $15,575. We would add that to the 18,000. What is it, Laura? 118,000 what? So then does everybody's math equal $134,325? Is that the kind of the understanding? Okay. That's my calculation. So then our in-kind target for this year would be the 134,325.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So they are not charging us market rate then, is what this sheet shows, is that there is some sort of discount for the in-kind services.
Well, we should probably go back to that, right?
Okay.
Because what I'm seeing is, and I think, John, this is probably start falling in your area. As you did comps for the market rate, you used a consultant's hourly rate. And that consultant works for the prep, right? So CAM Solutions work for the prep. You took a look at their rate, kind of balanced it against what the scope of work was. You multiplied that times the man hours and you came up with a number, right? Or I should say the people hours, right?
Our intention was to provide these services at a rate because our cost of our people providing those services. This is just a reference point. Hopefully provide you with the value being brought to PPSD.
Okay, so maybe we should walk through this. So we have meeting with ASU Prep, PESD, comparable services, CAM Solutions. I'm looking at the top line. The market rate is $5,000 at $125 per hour. So if I back into that, right? $40 hours worth of work. I could have done that in my head, right? 40 hours worth of work is kind of, that's a nice even round number, kind of a guesstimate of what was done for that.
With the intent, add to that is the intent was to provide an equivalent service that would have cost $5,000 with CAM Solutions at $3,500.
I see.
Of in-kind service.
And so the 3,500 comes from, where did that calculation come from?
That comes from the hours, focus on hours, of the industry crowd that are providing those services.
All right, so then if I take, okay. Okay, I think that's a great example. Does everybody understand how that all plays out?
No, can you explain?
So instead of $5,000, it charges $3,500, right? And so what John's saying here is that when they took a look at CAM as a comparable service, that came out to $5,000. When they took a look at their own pay rate for their own employees, they came out to $3,500. So instead of $125 an hour, it's 80 what? 87.5.
Is that comparable? And again, maybe it does not matter, it's just putting the pieces together to what our employees would be paid for a service like that?
Well, that's all part of managing the contract.
Yeah,
Right, and so I would say kudos to John for coming up with those comp rates, right, and trying to build a spreadsheet that explains all of this.
right,
Part of our obligation is being a partner and managing the contract would be to kind of do the same thing,
okay,
right? And on this spreadsheet, it doesn't show that we've done that. right?
okay,
And I think that's part of the path forward for the district is to take a look at those comp rates. And then again, to Ms. Bueno's point, adjust, add another column for the labor hours that we have put in. So that, you can kind of, because it takes the collaboration of the whole team. So the billing should ebb and flow, pluses and minuses for the whole team who was in the room at the time. So we're seeing one side of the team, not the other side of the team.
right, yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about this year, but we can go back to last year at any point to answer questions or take questions.
I do have just one real quick question. Can you go into more detail about the diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I cannot, but I can follow up.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board before? Thank you very much, Ms. Carson.
But I'll tell you just a little bit about this year. We met early in the year and tried to, set up a few things. Also just kind of thinking big picture, put together a partnership plan, which we're also happy to share with the board if you'd like. But really the big thing of the partnership plan is we set up pillars of our partnership. One of the things the board already just spoke about being kid focused is what we're doing, resulting in student outcomes, being collaborative and engaging with, we had everybody on the ASU prep team read Phoenix Elementary School District's commitment to equity to make sure that everybody understands that is the commitment that Phoenix Elementary School District is making to students and families and community, and our work should be in line with that. And then of course, the in-kind agreement, making sure that people are familiar with the in-kind agreement and what needs to be met and what the requirements are of that. For this year's work, we have, as Dr. Wake said, met a couple of times already. Right now we're in October talking to you about looking a little bit back to last year, playing a little bit of catch up. We'll give you an update about FY22, but at our next group meeting, we will start talking about FY23 in kind with our goal to bring you all a presentation on FY23 in kind plan in January or February. But it sounds like if the board would also maybe like to hear an update on FY22 earlier, our team's happy to come participate in that. I'm sure that's all. So this is the current tracking document of enrollments, where we're at for this year in FY22. One of the pieces that we talked about is talking as a team about the services and what the charges for the services and the service received, and that Phoenix Elementary School District is pleased with that service. So we are having all of those conversations right now, working on, these services are all currently being provided. Are they meeting the expectations of the Phoenix Elementary School District team? That's conversations we're currently having as academic team to academic team to make sure that we're providing services that meet those needs. So you've got a status update on enrollments, but we are still working on making sure this programming is matching the needs. And like I said, in the lease, we can charge for ASU preps time for meetings. We don't have that in the current tracker for this year. So at this point, there's no charge for that. But I think if we want to start thinking a little more about people and their hours and their time, and what's the cost for Phoenix Elementary School District to send who to which meetings, you know, we certainly can add that information in for the board for upcoming presentations.
I'm looking at this, just wondering from on our end, the numbers to have students in specials classes and math classes, are those, like, how much more would it have cost us to just hire our own teachers? Is that something we considered or couldn't do or didn't do for?
I would say, given the timing of the launch of the iAcademy, we were not able to secure the specials teachers, nor were we able to find a 6, 7, 8 science teacher in the moment. But that is something that we're definitely looking at.
Okay, so it was more of a, not necessarily a financial decision, but a timing decision. Okay, that makes sense.
So am I correct in thinking that the total cost here is 175,000, that's the in-kind service limit that we reached already?
That's where we're currently at based on the number of students who are enrolled, assuming they stay enrolled for the whole year, and assuming as we have this current update that these services are meeting the needs of Phoenix Elementary School District. And that's something we're talking about every time we meet. Are these services meeting the needs?
And then, so the in-kind service for this year is, what's the limit for this year? Still 118?
It's 135. It's higher than 118 this year because we were short last year. We didn't reach the $75,000 mark last year.
It's at 134, 325.
Okay, and here it's saying we're at 175. That's what.
And that is assuming that the students stay enrolled for the entire year. The number of students stay enrolled, because it's based on the semester enrollments.
Okay, because I'm just, again, if we're over our limit, I'm just wondering, I know it'll roll over into to 23. I just thinking the word like being consistent with what our limit is, but I know this is a whole school launch. Thank you.
I think it might be better if we come back in the future and talk about this last slide if the board is very interested, but I'll give you a quick overview. Just because when we talked about in-kind, there are some services that come from ASU Prep that I think can be confusing. It might seem like they're part of in-kind because they're sort of coming from the prep team, but they are not counted with in-kind. They are not part of in-kind because they are funded by grants. So just if you hear about work being done with the Arizona Virtual Teacher Institute, or work prep is doing to provide professional development at your sites, that work is covered by grants that we've earned. We're also have, Dr. Gonzalez, I don't remember which site, some of your sites are receiving support from our Math Momentum grant. And so there are some math teachers who are supporting your teachers and supporting students and helping get them caught up, those gaps. That's all part of other grants that ASU Prep has. None of that is counted as a part of in-kind. It's been, even amongst our own team, sometimes like a kind of like, what does this fall under? So I thought it might help to see written down, these are the things that are not part of in-kind. But we also can come back as a prep team and talk a little more about any of these programs if you'd be interested to hear about them in more detail.
So, because I think early on, someone said ASU Prep and ASU are separate. So I'm trying to figure out then, so, because initially in my head, the reason ASU Prep would kind of do a lot of these things is because they are a university and they want to have great teachers and want to work with the community. So how does this grant then, because I assume you could use your grant money to work with another district, right? So does ASU apply for the grants intentionally to work with Phoenix L, or how
Yeah,
is
that was a
that?
great question. So both of these are actually statewide grants. So ASU Prep has gotten these grants and we work with districts, schools all around the state. I'd say the partnership, really played a part in the Math Momentum grant. We were totally full and made space to add Phoenix Elementary School District students. The AZBTI grant is still wide open. You know, any of your principals or teachers, where we work one-on-one with principals to design personalized professional development for their sites if they'd like. We also just offer open professional development that any teacher can register for and participate in. And that's kind of like what you're saying, more in like the spirit of the charter of ASU, that we want to be contributing to the community.
Thank you. I'm hearing such great questions. Thank you, everyone. I would love to understand how schools, I guess, were selected, or is the teachers just kind of invited and only some respond? What does that look like? Because I was just making a small list of school names that I heard as we went through, and I only wrote down Capitol, Rare, and Garfield.
Yeah, as I understand it, and this is another piece where, since I wasn't in the meetings last year, I'm not sure, but kind of looking through meeting notes, it looks like lots of times sort of an announcement was sent out, and then schools that had that need, their leaders would respond and sign up their schools for those services. And then it sort of varied. So I know, like for master-based grading, we did a presentation at the district level, and then the EdEda team followed up and said, hey, we're starting our own master-based grading initiative this year. You know, could we get some additional coaching and support? And the district team approved that they could use some of the in-kind dollars specifically for their team to get that support.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That does help me wrap kind of around my head. I was wondering what the communication behind this behind the in-kind services are. So I guess my next, and we don't have to get off topic, but I am really interested in understanding why we didn't proceed with I forget what they're called, the video-based services. I'm sorry if I'm even understanding that right. I wasn't too sure what program we didn't follow through. Is that a different thing or the same thing? And
Yeah, so there were a couple, or I guess there are two things that I mentioned. One is the video, and I don't know the exact details, but part of it was just after a couple of meetings, I think that the decision was the support from prep really wasn't needed. And so it would have been maybe a superfluous in-kind service if we continued with that. The Phoenix Elementary School District team felt they were well equipped to finish off their project. For the signature schools, I did, because I did a lot of that work for signature schools, so that one I do understand. I had done some work on it at the beginning of the year, and then at a kind of early in the year in-kind meeting, I think it was in October. The message from the Phoenix Elementary School District team was, hey, we're just gonna pause on this. My assumption is that it's pandemic related. We had a lot of that at ASU Prep, just we need to get virtual learning right. We're gonna set some other things to the side so we can do what's right for kids, which is get virtual learning right. Then there was some talk about starting it up again, so I had done a little more work on it and had a couple of planning meetings. And to be totally honest with y'all, then I went on maternity leave, and then the project had kind of stopped by the time I came back. And so I'm not sure exactly what happened in the meantime.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks for the transparency. I really just want to understand if we filled the need elsewhere or not, or really what it, I guess what those services look like. Because I do feel like anything video related would be helpful, whether it's talking to teachers or students or communication wise. So I just wanted to get a better understanding. So maybe, I mean, just hearing that, is it possible those things might pick back up now that we have like this chunk that rolls over to the next year?
Yeah, I mean, anything that Dr. Gonzalez and her team think they need, I think again, when we look at where we're at in this year, being pretty, we're happy to offer services, well above the in-kind number. Our lease has a, way we can roll that over, so we don't need to say no more help. But I know sometimes there's also some thought about that, like if we want to have more services next year, if we're near the limit, and I think we'll be talking about, right, are those enrollments for the year? If they are enrollments for the year, we may be more or less set. If they're not enrollments for the year, then what new projects should we open up, to make sure that, we're meeting the most urgent needs?
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much for the explanation. And I do see that everybody's being so flexible and working together, so I appreciate the extra explanations.
I want to ask if you have any projected grants that you're going to go after that could also benefit us as a district.
That is a little less my area of expertise because I do the in-person schools, and the big grants are usually more of a higher level network plans.
We are involved with grants with the intent of serving all schools and partners, state of Arizona. Outside the ones Harry mentioned, with the ACBTI, national, we have some submissions, but we're not sure on other foundations. Those grants that we do, whether it's through maybe near the governor's office or any of those have been with the intent of serving as many Arizona teachers and Arizona students as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then just out of curiosity, does ASU Prep have like a foundation that also kind of contributes to the organization?
We receive tax donations like all school districts and charters across the state. We have received some grant dollars, through the ASU Foundation that were directed for K-12 students. But we don't have specific foundation.
Thank you.
Mr. Cayo, can you expand on the signature schools? Was that work aimed at supporting our signatures already in existence, or was it more so like the pathways, like setting up a foundation for new signature schools?
Yeah, the plan was to help kind of plan and design new signature schools in addition to the ones you already have.
Okay, thank you.
So piggyback off of that one, thank you, Mr. Cayo. So just for clarification, as far as the signature schools, I do remember having that conversation a couple years ago. So I want to ask where we're at now with it. Is that something we're not moving forward with as far as a collaboration?
Right now, no, I think there are still some new signature schools that were proposed to the board last year and are being, I'm a little bit on my notes here. I think this is not a question for us.
My apologies. It's a great question. I do remember having those conversations about signature schools and really getting those things kind of organized, but then the pandemic came, so I'm just wondering where we're at.
Yeah, of course, we have the Garfield Garden School, right? We have the Magnet Traditional School, the Sean Montessori signature. Dunbar School is working toward becoming an Avid school. I don't know that Emerson has really glommed onto a signature at this time. Kenilworth has kind of got a theme. I don't know that you would call it a signature yet, whole brain teaching theme at Kenilworth School. And what am I missing? Oh, the dual language at out of school. Mm-hmm. Yep, what else we have?
And I think as far as signatures and the kind of the trend toward it, I think that's it.
I think that's it. So I think it would be interesting to, take a look at both traditional and non-traditional signature schools. But I also am a strong believer that before we implement a signature, we want to have lots of conversations with the community to make sure that the community would be willing to support the signature, because oftentimes there's an added expense to having a signature school. And certainly there's a lot of startup that goes along with developing a signature. Sometimes you have to, maybe turn over some staffing or some leadership, depending on what the signature is. And so you want to make sure that your community and everyone is, it's kind of a transparent thing and folks are fully invested in the signature. I imagine that there's some survey work that you all have done in the past. If you're kind of an expert level at developing signatures, you probably have a recipe for all of this, right? And so if that might be an interesting receive to discuss, to bring ASU prep back to say, okay, what does the signature recipe look like? And based on an analysis of our remaining Title I schools, which school might be a good candidate for this? And of course, before we get to that point, I would want to check in with our own CNI team to see what our own CNI team felt about moving forward with a signature. But it's pretty, in my mind, from what I've seen from developing signatures, it takes some time. It takes some resources and lots of commitment from the community and the staff. You have to pay a lot of attention to it. The Garfield Garden School sheet that's been going on, that's been developing for probably 5 years. The Shaw Montessori, they've probably been at it for 30 years. Magnet Traditional's probably been there for developing for 20 years. So, and the Adetta Pack, boy, that thing's been around since the mid-90s. So, yeah, that just, I'd like to have a lot more conversation about that. I mean, I'm getting excited like you are, right? But I do think that it's just, I don't know that you push a button and off you go, but I think that having some conversations with the community, and I'm thinking of the Emerson community and kind of what we have heard over the years, Dr. Vink, that has kind of ebbed and flowed, kind of a Montessori light, or maybe something a little more artistic. You're from the neighborhood. Maybe you can kind of help me remember.
I mean, I think, yes, we've had conversations and that has given direction to Emerson and kind of led kind of what it is now, actually. The not slogan, but come grow with us is now painted on the walls. And that was something that we talked about 5 years ago, or I don't know, 4 years, something like that. But yes, community involvement, but I think, I think the signature school conversation is now slated to happen in Pathways to Success as we figure out what is happening with all of our schools, and whether we bring in ASU prep or any other, I don't know how else to say it, but high functioning school system, school district, to consult with us is something we should definitely consider as we move forward and make those decisions, because we need to see community of voice is incredibly important. I want to have that, but I also want to have the foundation for success for our students and our staff. And the community can't necessarily tell us what it costs to run a school or all of those things. So it all needs to work together.
I don't have any other questions. This is Carmen Trujillo. Any other comments? This would be the end of the presentation, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts you guys want to share? I know we're very new to each other. So I really appreciate the flexibility and, the level of conversation, and it not being the most formal thing. So I really appreciate your guys' time and look forward to hearing how you and the CNI team knock things out for our students.
We'll be back, we're excited. Tangentially, I'm also a Phoenix Elementary School District parent. My son goes to Shaw, so I'm a big fan. I'm excited to keep working and keep doing whatever we can. But yeah, thank you all so much for your time, and we're more than happy to be back to talk about any topics the board has interest in going forward.
Thank you guys.
Madam Chair, I do have a question for Laura Server Blanco. So, Laura, we talked about the rollover for in-kind, right? And so what does the lease agreement say about rollover at the last year of the lease?
It does not address that, so. Technically, that would have been a default under the old agreement, but they're going to roll it over. I think that's a good cure. Under this lease, if they don't provide it in a particular year, you can declare default. And they have to pay, they can pay that to make up the default, the difference.
And so going back to Mr. Hill's point, if we conduct kind of a program evaluation against, let's say, a large block of the in-kind service, or even all of the in-kind service, right? And it's determined that, the value doesn't necessarily jive with what we're trying to get done around here. Does the lease give ASU Prep the opportunity in that year for, let's say, a cash payout?
So here's one thing I wanted to go over. I'm glad you called me back up, because I kind of glossed over this before, but in the first year of this lease, you're supposed twice a year, by the 15th of December and June of that first lease year. And then in subsequent lease years, so the next 4 years, it's supposed to be quarterly. So 15th of each September, December, March, and June, ASU Prep is to provide the landlord with an accounting of the actual value of the resources spent in the planning, preparing, and or implementing the in-kind services in the previous reporting period, including the end of the month at which the determination is made. Landlord shall then have 30 days to accept or dispute tenant's accounting of the value. If a dispute exists, representatives of landlord and tenants shall endeavor to meet within 15 days, but no event later than 30 days after landlord's response to evaluate the value of the in-kind services provided by landlord. So they give you an accounting, you look at it, and maybe there's a couple things you don't agree with. So you would give a notice back to ASU Prep and say, we disagree. Would you like to meet 15 days to talk about this? Or you got up to 30 days to talk about it. After that informal meeting, you cannot resolve the dispute. It is to be submitted to arbitration and subject to the American Arbitration Association rules. And then after the arbitrator makes its decision, that's binding, and the prevailing party, the losing party basically has to pay the fees of the prevailing party. Okay, so I would recommend for both parties, because maybe people didn't read this real closely, but you should set up a meeting or they should provide accounting by December 15th. Then you've got 30 days to look at it, and if you disagree, set up a meeting and try to talk through it. After this year, it's quarterly. And the reason we did that was because things got lost in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you all for being here.
All right. Do would you like to take a break, everybody, before we move on to our pathways and?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think that would be a great idea.
I know it's late, guys. It is 7:57. We could be back by 8:05. And then we'll hear about our pathways to success meeting. Thank you all. And we can move on to item A6, our Pathways to Success, High Performance and Student Success Initiative.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Good evening, governing board members, cabinet, colleagues of the district, as well as the community that's listening to us or look here in our meeting. We want to give you an update regarding the pathway to success, and we have an agenda here, and but also want to emphasize that we'd like to be this, have this be an interactive session that we can get questions and feedback from you as we go through the presentation. We're going to be discussing today a little bit of the background of pathways to success, how it got started and so forth, some of the challenges and questions and issues that we're dealing with, also some of the goals that we've set and we're working on to achieve, and also the committee structure that we set up, and we're going to have the co-chairs of each committee also give an update on what they're doing and they're going to be doing in the future. We have Linda Jeffries and Nick Lodato that are heading up the Enrollment and Stabilization and Retention Committee. Teresa Nikolic and Alicia Salvis, they're heading up the Optimization of Equitable and Quality Instruction Committee. And then Chris Walford and Vic Diaz are heading up the Reimagining Pre-K to 8th grade education. We also like to introduce you tonight a couple of partners that are joining us and engaging with us on this project. And they will also be helping us present information as far as the process that we're following and are going to be, are going to follow in the future to carry out this strategy and this initiative. And obviously, we want to be able to answer questions and feedback. But I do want to encourage to ask questions throughout the presentation. Again, we want this to be an interactive session. We'd love to get your feedback on any of this information that we're providing to you. And with that, we'll get started. So first of all, again, back to kind of the reason this whole initiative started, and back over the last year and a half or so, we've received demographic information regarding the enrollment that we have at the district, and the fact that we've had declining enrollment for several years. We indicated through our own information and also through a demographer the fact that our enrollment has declined for the last 10 years on average of over about 200 students per year. And in particular, the last 3 years were more concerning because the drop in the enrollment has actually dropped higher than it had in the past, so that became more of a concern. And also, when we submitted information regarding this year's enrollment, we noticed that the drop since before COVID also has been more drastic. So we have I wouldn't say lost, but we have low enrollment of over 400 kids in that year and a half, 2 period. And so that's something that is more concerning to us, that we're trying to make sure we address it and address it quickly. And so with that, we're looking at the impact of not just the fiscal impact of what that does for our schools, for our district, as far as expense wise, because as you know, with lower enrollment, you have lower ADM, average daily membership, and lower revenues. And so that's a concern that we had that we want to try to address. But also the impact on student achievement, student performance. We have an inclination that if when we have let's say a higher either teacher-student ratios or maybe not enough sections in each of the grades, that could have an impact on the student achievement and performance of the kids. So those are the things we're going to look at to hopefully make a difference in this whole initiative for our kids especially. And so as we frame the discussion here, we want to figure out how to address the student performance in this challenge of in a declining enrollment. I mean, student achievement and fiscal challenges are difficult things to deal with when you have steady enrollment. So when you have declining enrollment, it makes it more difficult. And so those are things that we're reviewing and figure out how we can resolve those issues. So we're basically looking to hopefully rebalance our system and rebalance our infrastructure. And that could mean a lot of things. It could be a matter of putting in different educational models. I mean, and not to not to kind of scare people, but, it also potentially be looked at, we'll be looking at maybe possibly posting schools. It's something that we definitely want to avoid, but it's also in the back of our mind that, that if it's not avoidable, then we have to make the decisions, at some point as well. But, we do want to emphasize that, that is not our first priority. We want to ensure we do everything possible to increase, the student achievement, increase enrollment, and before before those things happen.
I have a question for the declining enrollment. Are we also looking at some type of correlation to the lack of family housing that is in our district?
We are, and that's one of the things that in the demographic study we got information not just on the change demographics as far as the number of kids that are school age within our facility or within our boundaries that may be leaving the district, but also we got information related to affordable housing, the fact that there wasn't enough affordable housing being built, and so they also describe some of the projects that are coming up. So definitely the discussion about affordable housing is something that we're also looking at as well.
Thank you.
And going off of that, yeah, I think it's just, getting something would be wonderful is like some kind of, I don't know, policy push or something we can have, since we're already having discussion with council members regarding the triplets, but just beyond that is like, to Donna's point is like, what can we hand over to council members so that they can understand the problems that we're going through out of this initiative? And if that looks like saying, to meet our goal of if we want to reach our 2,000, I don't know if it was 16, where we had like 7,000 students. If we want to meet that number, this is how much affordable family housing we would need. And like, that's the stuff like that I want to provide them so they understand the issues work that are endemic to our district and how they can help support us too.
So yes, that's a very good point. That I think those goals need to be set. And also speaking of housing, one of the concerns that we also have is housing for staff, teachers and other staff, that we would love to then to live within our communities, within our boundaries. And so those are the kind of things that, we want to take into account and hopefully, have an impact on that as well as we move forward. And so these are some of the challenges that we've notated as part of the task force. Obviously, this list could probably be a lot longer. We're just trying to emphasize some of the bigger concerns and questions. In those, but we can also try to figure out what are some of the higher priorities. And again, back to demographic analysis, and the reports show that there is a good amount of gentrification going on in the Central Phoenix area, and so families are potentially moving out of the area because it's not affordable anymore, and also that the demographic studies show that there's not a big relief in sight as far as increasing demographic of the school age kids in the community, and so those are things that we will be looking at. I also want to mention that the demographic study was done at the kind of the very end of the census cycle for the 2020 cycle, and now that we with another census in 2020. We're also want to get new information from the demographer. We work with applied economics, so we want to get more recent data that we can have from the demographer, but also some of the more detailed data that we need to get also from speaking to Rick Brammer from applied economics. That the data specific to like certain areas and zip codes is not available until about February. But as soon as that information is available, we're going to engage back with him and get us updated information. Also, the other thing that came out of the demographic analysis is the fact that we have 53% capture rate within our school boundaries. And so that's a little bit of a concern for us because out of all the school age kids that live within our boundaries of the school, we're only capturing 53 that are coming to our schools. So the other 40%, the other 47% are going to either charter school or maybe staying home or private schools or even outside the district. Also want to mention that we also have a pretty good percentage of families that come to our school from other districts as well. That's around about 30% of students that come in from other districts in other zip codes outside of our region, in our boundaries. And again, back to the demographic study is that we want to get more information, more detailed information about this capture rate. If we can also have it be more specific to a particular school area, that we can see what is the capture rate in a particular, let's say Emerson or Magnet. And that's information that won't be available till March or February. But again, as soon as it is, we want to get that information and hopefully have some kind of marketing efforts to try to capture those students that are not coming to us. Did you have a question?
Yes, and in what you're saying, can we also include the capture rate of ASU prep in our district boundaries?
Let me find out. Possibly, but let me find out.
So we did do some sort of thing where we looked at other districts and where their students were going, so maybe look and see if we've already done something like that somewhere. Because I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. Remind me too, if we decided that if we did capture 100% of our school age population, that's still not enough kids for to fill our schools, right? I think we looked at that at some point, but now I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you looked at that since I've been here. I know I didn't get the information, but we do right now as far as the full capacity of the schools, we're at about a 52% capacity. So we have excess capacity of 47% of all the facilities now. The additional 47%, could it fill that? Possibly. I think we would have we would have enough space to accommodate those students. But I think the question would be is, can we, if we have like let's say average number of students per school that we think is reasonable for us to provide good instruction, which is, I mean, depending on who you talk to, it could be anywhere 400 or 500 a state. We do have some schools that are below 300, some that are about 3, some are about 400. And so with the additional, if we increase our capture rate, we could probably get the majority of our schools above 400 or 450 if we were to capture, the 89% of the other students. Yes, Dr. Luis?
Dr. Baker, I think what you're talking about is the additional variable of students attending from outside the district in open enrollment. As part of the formula that we have to determine when we talk about the capture rate of students within our attendance boundaries is also to factor in the total attendance per site to include the 33% of the students who come to us from outside of our attendance boundaries to determine if the additional 47% or the target rate of 70% really gets us where we need to be in terms of the threshold that you're talking about, Mr. Quintana, which used to be, anecdotally, the magic number was always 400 students. Right. Nobody can seem to really clearly define how that formula came to be. Right. It's just a magic number.
Right.
But it's a number that all school district finance folks believe to be true in terms of either a break-even point or enough of a staff to be able to develop strong PLCs among teachers, things like that. And I'm sure it's connected to the pupil-teacher ratio at some point. But anyway, that what you're talking about, Dr. Mink, really, we have to also include the variable of the open enrolled students who come to us from outside of our attendance when we talk about total enrollment per campus.
That makes sense. I think I was just remembering like the population in the area because that was declining as well, the number of children. Like if we capture them, I don't know that I love this term, but will that be enough? And I thought that at some point it would not be because so many families are moving out of the city. But
yeah, I think that the February final census data relative to kind of wraps up our last demographic studies. It's gonna be pretty telling because it won't be 10-year-old information. It'll be very current information.
And another, kind of a concern challenge is student achievement, student performance, as well as the letter grades that we have as a school system. And we have a lower ASEAN2 passing rates than the state averages. We also have a low number of sections per grade. That's kind of referred to our tall skinny schools. And on average, we have, as a system, we have a little bit less than 2 sections per grade. And so, in some ways, that's probably like a minimum level. We want to be at least 2 sections per grade. However, we do have several schools because of demographics in the particular schools. We might have 1 section per grade, others might have 3. And so that's where the concern comes in when you only have one section per grade. And, there's not a really good kind of backup system to support each other. So those are things that we also want to look at as well. And then, back to the grades, we have obviously a couple excellent schools overall that have A's and B's, but unfortunately, we do have 10 of our 13 schools that are C's and D's that we'd love to deal with the challenge of increasing those to A's and B's. And then the other, this is really more of a question than a challenge, is that currently we have basically a kinder to 8th grade model across all districts. Across the district. Obviously, with the exception of Faith North, it's a pre-kinder program. But the question that we're going to be addressing here, in the next few months is that is that the best model we want to have across the districts, or do we want to have some variable different types of programming in school models? So that'll be kind of to be determined, or to be researched and evaluated. We put together some of the kind of goals and objectives that we want to have in for this overall initiative, and we put it in a from to format that we're indicating that on the left side, the from, this is where we're at now, and the to is where we want to be. In some cases, it could be a year from now. In some cases, maybe 3 years, depending on the particular goal. But I just want to give you a sense of some of the things that we're thinking about as far as the task force that we want to address and improve on. Again, we mentioned the capture rate. Right now we're at 53, and obviously we'd like to be higher than that. At least a 70, and hopefully if not higher. The 10 of the 13 schools that are C's and D's. We would love to have all our schools be A's and B's. Obviously, A's better than B's. So that'll be our target. And then targets related to performance, student achievement. Right now, based on the 2019 information, we have a 31% passing rate for ELA under Arizona merits. The state average is 45, so we'd love to at least be at the state average, if not higher. For math, we're at 28% passing rate on the ASEAN2. We would love to be at a state average of 42, obviously if not higher. And right now, we have, as of last year, we had 427 students per school on average. And at some point, we'd like to have some type of a true sense of what should be our minimum number that we should have at a school that makes it, performing at a high level, that's fiscally sound and sustainable. Unfortunately, the 427 student average has gone down. This year because of COVID, now we're down to slightly below 400 at about 398. But also it takes into account that some of the students also moved over to the I Academy. So the 398 number is not reflective of the I Academy. So if those students were attending one of our brick and mortar schools, it'd probably be slightly over 400. But either way, the trend is still trending down as far as the average number of kids per school. The more concerning ones are where we have some schools that are falling below 300, and they're in the 250 range. those, we have to figure out, what can we do to improve that, and how can we continue providing, very good instruction, even though we have a lower enrollment. And the next couple ones are really more of a question mark. We're debating whether we should have a goal related to student growth. That ties into, student achievement and the passing rates of the Easy and Twos, but also, there's other measures that we look at throughout the year as far as the growth of the growth rate for the students' achievement. And so those are things we're considering putting in place, but we'd like to get your feedback on that as well. And again, back to the mix of K through 8. If we want to keep those, do we want to consider different models? Those are things that we'll be looking at, including, we talked a little bit earlier about the signature schools. That's something that is also part of the assessment that we want to go through as well as part of this process. And also, one of the things that we noticed is regarding achievement and enrollment is that probably because of COVID, we also have a lower attendance percentage compared to enrollment. In the past, prior to the COVID timeframe, the district was averaging about 95% attendance compared to enrollment. And since then, this year we're averaging about 90%. And so that's something that, especially when things get back to, quote unquote, past the COVID, that we can get back to 95, 96, 97% attendance. Because ultimately, that, we're sure that also has an impact on student achievement, if the kids aren't obviously attending school.
I have just a couple of questions
Yeah.
about this
Yeah.
graphic. So I can see that the ELA scores and AZ Merit scores are from state averages, and just trying to figure out how we chose the other goals, and then whether, I know the school letter grade is a formula, so if our schools have an average of 45%, 42%, and a student attendance rate of 97%, is that enough to have all of our schools be an A or a B, or are they going to need more than that? Does that make
Right.
sense? Okay.
Yeah, but Dr. Gonzalez, do you know more about the way they rate the schools?
Yes, thank you. Board member, Dr. Vink, and the formula for figuring out the letter grades does change, and they're currently reviewing what the process is going to be, but it does include growth points. It also looks at how you move different exceptional groups of students from minimally performing to moderately performing to highly performing. And then it also looks at things like total tested. Now, this last year, they didn't do total tested as part of that formula, but there's always, so we always have to kind of think about what are all the different functions that we have to meet in order to do that. So it's difficult to say that with 97% and 42%, that would necessarily get us to an A, but that would certainly be a long way toward helping us reach higher letter grades than we currently have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure that it all fits together. I mean, so the 70% district capture rate is a number we chose because that would put us at a sustainable enrollment.
Right.
But is that an attainable number? Like, are other districts capturing 70%?
Right.
That's kind of where I'm.
No, definitely, I get your point, because you're right. I mean, if we have a goal here, it's got to be achievable, so right now these goals are also in draft form. So we're gonna tweak this a little bit, especially once we get more information about the new demographic analysis. Because to your point, I mean, even if when we get the demographic analysis, we don't know yet if 70% is enough. So once we get that information, we'll know more, and we'll adjust the goal accordingly.
I just have a comment, and then maybe I'll proceed. going forward. So a lot of this is bound to our campuses, our district. And what I'm looking forward to is like goals that reflect like how we want to empower the community. Again, it's like identifying those issues, which you've already identified, Mr. Quintana, is like housing needs. But going more so than that, like our communities are food deserts, how we can empower the community, because a lot of what we're doing is saying how can we empower our students within the boundaries of our campus. But I'm a strong believer as a teacher is like our students are coming from the community and that is affecting a lot in good and bad ways. With the problems that they're dealing with, and we all know that if all of us that work in the education setting, even outside. So what I'm asking is like, we have goals of like, where's our community at now, not just where our school district is. Like, this is perfect for our school district, but where's our community at now? And what goals do we want to get into too? Like, if there's 30% of our population lives in a food desert, well, how can we lower that? Something like that, because I think that is something that's gonna ultimately benefit the school district and draw students and draw families into our campus when they see that we're a school district with those resources, such as what we're planning on opening with those resources for our families too.
No, definitely, thank you, Mr. Carrillo. So that's a good point, that, yeah, these goals, don't tie to the community, but that's something that is important for us to do as well. And whether it comes to food or even transportation, those are the things we want to consider when it comes to, kind of coming up with strategies, because we want to figure out, does it make sense to, bus kids just within the school boundaries, or can we spread that out to, more other areas? But also, with the food situation, that we are, we are Title I school district, so we do have resources to provide more food than maybe other districts can. And so I think you're right. I think we got to take those into consideration, and how we can incorporate that into the actual goals as well.
Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Creo, and I think if this were broken down a little bit better, we would be able to see, because what he's talking about is the root cause, right? If our students don't eat, they're not going to attend school, or if we're not feeding the students that need to be fed, they're gonna go to schools that will. So I think we could break this down a little bit more so that we're looking at, because pathways to success, right, is big. We know that we have some funds that we wouldn't normally have, and we should be including all of those resources and things that we're looking at, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, so part of like some of the work that the committee is doing, I think we'll also touch on that, and maybe not so much now, but in the next couple of months, for example, when it comes to enrollment, we want to be able to, and I don't want to get too hard, so I'm just going to talk about this, but, for example, when it comes to enrollment, we want to figure out, why do families come to us versus going somewhere else? Why don't they come to us? Versus come to us, and so if some of those things come up when it comes to providing either, food for the families, that, we can entice them to come to us instead of going somewhere else. But also the ideas that, we got, that Dr. Gonzalez is talking about, also the community support centers that we want to put in place as well. I think all those things, can be part of this. And that, I think will help, with the overall enrollment, with the community, with instruction and so forth. So, yeah, I agree, those all should be part of the discussion. And again, appreciate the feedback, because those are some things that we have the community leads here, that are going to be working on this as well. And we also have the consultant is going to help us to also master plan this whole initiative. And so those are that's kind of feedback that we want to hear, and so we can incorporate that to our plans. So with that, we have the three committee coaches that we'll be speaking to that particular work on the committees, and we're going to start with Ms. Linda Jeffries, that's going to speak to the role and functions and things they're doing related to enrollment, stabilization, and retention.
Good evening, President Trujillo, members of the governing board, and Dr. Weeks.
I'm Linda Jeffries, I'm Director of Marketing Communications, and I am going to talk with you about the progress of the Enrollment, Stabilization, and Retention Subcommittee. And so the overall objectives to this committee is, of course, to stabilize enrollment and retention, to increase enrollment at all of our schools, to increase the capture rate within our district and our school boundaries, and then also to conduct research on enrollment and retention trends. So we know that one of the cornerstones to any successful organization is a customer service program. And so we want to have exceptional customer service throughout our district, at the district office, as well as at all of our schools. And so one way that we plan to do that is we're launching our own customer service program called Unleashing Sensational Customer Service. So we just launched a training with all of our administrators just a couple weeks ago. And so we want to take this one step further because we want to engage our front office staff and our secretarial staff. We know that those are our resident experts in customer service. And so our plan is to bring our clerical staff in, provide this training on sensational customer service. But we want our office staff to develop our own customer service standards, what our mission for customer service is, what our pledge is going to be to our community. And so over the next several months, we'll be working with this team to develop our own customer service standards. And then once we do that, then we will be training all of our employees across the district at every level of the organization on what our standards are. And then we're going to hold people accountable to those standards by having an assessment of that, if you will, and having a secret shopper come around to all of our schools and assess the levels of customer service that they receive, both in person and over the telephone. So we're very excited about this new project, and we're looking forward to bringing further developments as we begin to create our customer service standards. And so I want to talk a little bit about our marketing efforts because certainly marketing is a main factor to increasing enrollment, stabilizing, and retaining our students. And so over the course of the last 6 months, you might remember our conversations in terms of marketing efforts. So one of the things that we did is we revamped our kindergarten registration mailer. Right now, we've had lots of conversation about how do we increase our enrollment. And one way that we really want to focus on is we know we capture those early childhood learners, our preschoolers and our kindergartners. Then that's just a natural progression to enroll them into kindergarten and first grade. And so we really wanted to put an emphasis on our preschool and our kindergarten students. So we revamped our kindergarten mailer this last year. You might recall seeing that in February and throughout the spring. And we sent a kindergarten mailer out to 65,000 residents within the district boundaries. In addition, we sent mailers out for Faith North Preschool as well as Shaw Montessori Preschool. Again, we hit 65,000 households for each of those mailers. And then we also invited parents to come to preschool and do tours over at Faith North and also at Shaw Montessori. And then in addition to that, we did some digital Facebook advertising for Faith North to try to increase the enrollment of our preschoolers. And then one last area that I wanted to talk about that the committee is currently involved is the research area. And so we know that in order to better understand our families' desires and how they make decisions in terms of what schools they want their children to attend, is we need to know how they feel about our school district. We want to know why our parents are choosing to withdraw their children from our schools, but we also want to know why parents decide to bring their children to our schools. So we created 2 internal surveys. One is an exit or withdrawal survey, and then the other is a new enrollee student survey. We've trained all of our front office staff so that when families do withdraw, or if they enroll new enrollees into the school, then our front office staff will ask them a series of questions. Now, we want to be sure that we're all about building relationships in Phoenix Elementary. So we don't want to just hand a survey to a family because we know that they probably won't fill it out. So we are engaging our families in the front office and having conversations and asking, why are they choosing to withdraw? Are they moving out of the district? Is it because of transportation? So that will provide us some great feedback in terms of perceptions and what's really happening. And then we'll be able to run those reports on a monthly basis and see what trends that we're seeing. In addition, you might recall that we've talked about Hanover research. And so we're currently working with Hanover to conduct a number of surveys that will provide some great information. We worked with Hanover to do interviews with families who have withdrawn their students from our schools. And we focused on 3 years worth of data. So we worked with families from 2018, 2019, and 2020. And so now we've just asked them to go and do that study one more time, but we're focusing on families who have withdrawn from the school district from June of 2021 through September of 2021. So that'll give us a broad range from 2018 through current day. So they're currently working on that interview study, and we should have the results of that interview study by December. And then the next survey that they will do for us is a comprehensive community survey. So we want to go out and we want to interview our families, our community members, our own employees, and our students. And we want to understand how do they feel about our schools? What are they looking for in our schools? How do they want to be communicated with? And so we're very excited to launch that next phase of the research. And we're hoping that that will start after the 1st of January once the current study is completed. And so with that, let me just talk a little bit about.
I'm sorry, I have some
Yes, I'm
questions.
sorry. Yes.
So under the customer service initiative, I'm assuming that we're gonna use the front office staff that we currently have.
Yes. Yes, so front office staff of our schools, and then we'll also ask district office level secretarial staff and others throughout the district.
So my question is, do we know the number of the front office staff that is bilingual?
I don't have that number, but we can certainly get that for you.
So I think that's gonna be very important once we're building these relationships, is that we're able, the person that they're talking to is able to communicate with them.
Absolutely.
And then second is, will the customer service people be using like a customer relations management system in order to track like how just in order to track that family and how, how are they moving through the district and how are we really capturing and keeping track of our families and their needs is what I'm asking.
So that's a good question. Now, are you referring to when families enroll, how are we tracking the families? Or I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
Well, I think I'm just stating that I think we need a better CRM management program that can, that we can keep track of our families' needs, maybe they're moving from school to school, but like, I just feel that there's a break in communication and trust with our families. And so if we're able to better track what they need, what their issues are, we're able to kind of adapt to their needs. So I'm not understanding if, and we could also use it for, updating their contact information. Like, I just would like to understand if we did have a better CRM system. And then another comment was, I had seen that Cartwright School District has a position called a recruiter. Like they have an active recruiter that is going out there recruiting students to come to their school district. And I just thought it was a really neat idea. And I would like to see us come up with a similar position or try to do something in that manner as well, because I understand you're the marketing communications person, and I don't really think that that's necessarily your job to be recruiting people. And I think that's why this position would be very beneficial. And then lastly is the Hanover research surveys. what grade level, what reading level are they at, the survey questions?
So right now it's an interview study, so it's an actual researcher who's calling and asking specific questions and having conversations and getting their feedback. So it's not something that they're reading, but it's through conversations.
Okay, and this is happening in Spanish as well?
Yes,
Alrighty.
yes, the researcher who's conducting is fluent in 3 different languages.
Okay, so it's by phone call, any door to door, showing up at events at certain sites.
With this particular survey, because we are talking with families who have already withdrawn from the district, it's all based off of telephone conversations because most of them, have either moved out of the district. So we're trying to capture those people who are willing to talk with us, and the best way to do that is number one, by trying to contact them first through a warm email, introducing ourselves and who might be calling, and then of course trying to reach them through telephone calls and setting up interviews. So right now there is no door-to-door because of the nature of the group that we're trying to target.
They have experience in working with our demographics?
Yes, they do.
Information?
Yes, they do. Hanover is a widely recognized research firm. And so they definitely understand dynamics of our district. They've worked with a number of school districts here in the Phoenix area. And certainly everything that they do is both in English and in Spanish.
Okay, because it's been, through my experience, that numbers change very frequently.
Numbers of
Phone numbers.
Yes, right. And that's one of the challenges when we're talking about families who have withdrawn from the school district. That is one of the challenges that we have. We don't have the most current phone numbers. We don't have the most current email. So yes, so that is one of the challenges of trying to track down those families, is because we don't have a way to get in contact with them. Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
If I might just add on to that, thank you very much, Ms. Bueno. I think that's why footwork and knocking on doors is so important in our community, because if we're so relationship based as far as building these connections, face to face really helps. And I do understand that we are in a pandemic. So I think I would love to hear, I guess, how Hanover might aim to do that, since we are relying on them to connect with and get this work done. If that's a possibility, are they willing to go door to door to get that information?
Just so those are all things that we'll be discussing. So a lot of the work with our families and with our community members will be on the school district. So Hanover, helps us develop the survey instrument. They are out, most of their researchers are out of state, so they're a national organization. So we'll definitely be working with our community engagement coordinator and all of our liaisons at all of our schools, so that when we do the community survey, we're going to do our best to reach our families and our students and community members, whether that be, posting things in the library, posting things on social media. Things will be, families will have the opportunity to click on links, so it is going to be digital. But there's ways that we can also look at, if we need to have other survey methodologies, we'll certainly look at that. So we'll be we'll be definitely using our community liaisons at all of our schools, or our engagement liaisons at all of our schools, so that we can better reach our families and our community.
And will they also participate in the customer service project?
Who specifically are you
The
referring to?
community liaisons?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll have representation from all of our support staff, primarily. Are you referring to the individuals who are creating the standards, or?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
So absolutely, yes. So we'll certainly work with our district community engagement coordinator, and certainly invite our school liaisons to the table. Certainly the more people that we have, of course, the stronger our network is, and being able to brainstorm what we really feel will be our customer service standards. So we'll definitely work with that.
Got it. I feel like our support staff are always everybody's always overwhelmed, so I hope this doesn't become something that's added, that kind of makes our jobs harder, I guess as is, so I hope there's plans for either extra compensation for added duties, that kind of stuff is considered as well. And then also maybe including on here what role, since we've already talked about support staff, what role administration plays in researching our community, researching what evidence-based stuff is going on as far as journal articles in different areas that look like our demographic, that kind of a thing, where it's staying up on what's going on everywhere, not necessarily just finding or using resources to better understand our community, or really relying on solely our community to better understand it, what's being done at the top level to really make sure we're gonna see this all the way through. I would love to have that included in here as well. 'Cause I feel like far too often we just hear, we're just gonna manage our foot soldiers, the people that are on the ground all the time. So that's part of the school board responsibilities, I think, is being mindful of what's going on in the community around us, just to be able to bring it back here. So I just would love to understand how that looks at our level of administration as well. Please, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
In line with, I guess, Ms. Bueno's, mention of the customer service system, okay, I don't know that fancy term, but, I do know about Power School and some other systems that we have used or do use in our schools to kind of, that can take data from families, and, I agree that we need more tracking of when we've talked to a family, right? So if a family walks into a school and they say, hey, I'm interested in this school, I have a 4-year-old, and I absolutely want to have our office staff have a very consistent greeting, customer service, all those things. But I also want them to be able to schedule that family for a tour, and a tour that is planned. At Emerson, we did sit down and we worked together to figure out what does a tour look like. But it shouldn't be each school really having to create that. It should be like, here's how to do a tour, check off all of these things, because it's district things that we want them to have too. We want the families to know that we have all of these district programs. So that should come from district as a thing. This is what your tour should include. And then if schools want to add other things, they can. We also need every school to have tours consistently. Our highly enrolled, I don't have words today, surrounding schools, they have tours scheduled either every month, or some of them have tours twice a month. And it is like clockwork, and it is not starting in January, it is year round, because we need to get into daycares, moms groups, all of those things. That's where our marketing needs to go. You need almost ambassadors, right? That are part of these moms groups, that are at the library, that are talking to other families, and that's the other thing, like, can you pick up a registration packet for Phoenix L School at the library? Because that's where those families are with their little kids. So those are just kind of to piggyback on the rest of our community things. But I do appreciate you, and I like where this is headed. But I know that our families start thinking about schools way before kindergarten, and we want them to know that Phoenix #1 is where they should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for your suggestions. They are excellent suggestions. I will share with you, Dr. Big, that the school tours that you're referring to, that was actually a brainchild of Mr. Lodato and also Diane Salazar over at Faith North Preschool. So we met collectively as a team last spring, and we kind of mapped out what would a school tour look like. And so I know that Mr. Lodato is kind of piloting that right now, and it was his goal to refine that and then develop, such as what you're talking about, a district-wide project list or check sheet, if you will, to provide that to other principals, and then to talk them through, here's how Mr. Lodato did it over at Emerson, and then start establishing that consistency at each of our schools. So, and Mr. Lodato is actually co-chairing this committee with me, and so I know that that's one of the things that we'll certainly be talking about with this committee. And so I just remind you that some of the things that you're seeing here is just a brief overview of the work that we've done so far. And then certainly moving forward, these are all great ideas that I'll be sharing with the committee as we start refining and looking at other avenues that we could be looking at to market our district and communicate and all of those things. So I truly appreciate your input. And so along those same lines, as we're looking forward to what the committee what we're calling opportunities that the committee will begin looking at, which will guide our work, are a few examples that you'll see here. So certainly we'll be looking at assessing and developing our marketing plan. You might recall I presented to the board last year a couple of times on the district's marketing plan. So we'll certainly be reviewing that marketing plan and adding to that marketing plan and refining it. We'll be working with our principals to assess possible retention strategies at each of our schools. We talked about customer service, and that's already underway. I'm certainly looking at what other strategies can we be using to increase the capture rate, and then also establishing ways to survey our families, and then also surveys of families who have withdrawn from our schools, and those are things that I've already touched on. And so if there are no other questions, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Teresa Nikolic, and she's going to be giving you an update on her subcommittee. Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, President Trujillo, Governing Board, Dr. Weeks, and guests. I'm Teresa Nikolic, the Director of Curriculum, and I am the co-chair for our subcommittee of optimizing equitable and quality instruction with Alicia Zelfus, who is our Director of Exceptional Services, who could not be here tonight. So our role and purpose for the committee, of course, my greatest passion is for student achievement and for our kids to blossom and grow and have tremendous opportunities in their future. It is also to assess and evaluate our programs and to improve our letter grades. I'm going to share a little bit of kind of the background work that's being done with Dr. Gonzalez and our CNI team. We are fortunate to come into a district CNI team that is full of talented educators. And we've been really impressed with the work that they've been doing to help support our schools. But as we know, we have also a new instrument, a diagnostic tool through the iReady that we're learning, and a number of new curriculums. Dr. Gonzalez has set up for us to do school site support visits that were on campuses every week in teams of 4. So not only are we collecting data and building relationships, we know that relationships is the foundation of all the work that we do. So by getting out there and building relationships and talking to teachers and talking to children and talking to principals and learning about their work, it allows to guide us in moving forward to improve outcomes for all children. Also, we know that the Real Grant is coming to an end this year, and we are about to ramp up our teacher evaluation committee, where we'll be looking at our observation instrument. And is the LLI improving instruction and outcomes for kids? Or do we want to look at a different instrument that can kind of guide all of our work and be woven through everything that we do? In addition to that, Dr. Lloyd has been working on an assessment map to kind of guide our future so that we can be collecting data. And we are also coming into a standards mastery assessment that children will be taking throughout the year that will allow us to see where they're at according to their grade level standards. So with all that being said, when we brought our committee, our subcommittee together, we have had about 5 or 6 meetings, and we first wanted to define what our own values are. We looked at what does equitable and quality education look like, what does improved student achievement and performance look like, and then we defined what assessment of optimal and equitable sizes of classes, sections, and school means to us, and what does improving the letter grade mean to us and look like, so that it can ground all of our work. Then we started looking at different instructional models because this is reimagining and pathways looking forward. So each week we took a different instructional model, and our group looked at the strengths of that model, what are the challenges of that model, and what would that mean for our district if we went that direction. Some of the models that we investigated was grade level band schools, so like a pre-K to 4 and a 5-8, then we broke it down to a pre-K to 3, a 4-6 and a 5-8, what could that look like? We looked at personalized learning and learning mastery programs or instructional models. We looked at specialty school programs, and then we were headed into co-teaching, and another recommendation from one of our members was to look at what a year-round school model could mean. Knowing that we were looking for our strategic planner to come on board and kind of guide our work, we also wanted to make sure as we moved forward that our CNI team was capturing data to bring to our group to inform our decisions moving forward. So where we're at now is we this week kind of reflected on all of the research and where we were at and where we wanted to go with our subcommittee. Our subcommittee would like to broaden our horizon. We had sent out an email and invited anybody to join our group. We've had about 5 to 8 that consistently have participated in our subcommittees. And then moving forward, we wanted a larger audience. We also wanted to be realistic in our dreams, you know, what really are the possibilities that are within our limits or in our realm. We didn't want to dream too big and then find out that that wasn't going to be a realistic dream. But they've had some amazing ideas, and our real focus is, like, what do we want the future of education to look like? Knowing that the world is no longer about filling with content, because when we were young, it was about memorizing facts. But now, like, I'm not a good speller. I was co-teaching in the classroom and I was like, I don't know how to spell this, and a child in 2 seconds flat had Googled it and gave me that answer. So it just goes to show how resourceful our children are. And our focus is about the thinking and the problem solving. Knowing that this world is about having all the answers, it's about bringing a community together and solving real world problems. So a lot of our talks have also been, how can we create an education system that our children are solving problems within our community? And so we were really excited to get a strategic planner on board with us to kind of frame our work and help us move down that road. Sorry, I'm not talking fast.
Thank you, Ms. Nicholas. I guess I never considered that before, the mixed schools option. But being a parent that did actually participate in that, I'm really excited to hear more about that, those plans going on, because I don't know why I just never thought of that, but that's where I remember you from, at Osborne, so I'm just really excited to hear about that. But whatever went on was a well-oiled machine, and I'm happy to hear that that's in the works as far as just, you know, thinking about it and seeing what, you know, what's good for us. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for all the information.
Thank you. And we're really trying to reach out to teachers and say with our new curriculum, like, what is the strengths? Like, how much time are you spending planning? Because we know that well-planned teachers result in strong outcomes for kids. So the work that we've really been doing on the CNI team is saying with all this new curriculum, what else do they need? How do we bring learning alive? Because that's the beauty of the classrooms, is bringing learning alive. And we all know this school year didn't start the way, we wanted it to start with the pandemic. But I can say, since visiting schools after fall break, to really see their excitement and getting some traction and momentum. Dr. Gonzalez and I were just talking about it and seeing all the great things happening, like we're moving in the right direction. It's just really about like, what are the right supports and what is that system, so that that collaborative learning cycle continues to grow and build on each other, day after day, week after week, and year after year. So I'm excited too, because this is what I love. So thank you. And opportunities moving forward and assessments. Of course, we're going to continue looking at the assessments of impact on school enrollment per school. Also, we're not using Galileo, but we are talking about the iReady diagnostic and how that can be used for student growth. And then what is the best measure to determine, student growth? Is it fall to spring? Is it spring to spring? Also looking at optimal and equitable numbers of students per class for quality education. Some of the things that we've talked about just as a CNI team and within our committee is, does everybody get the same thing? Because that's not equitable, So we really need to look at like, what are the needs of the community? What are the needs of our kiddos, so that we can ensure that every child gets what they need. And then improving student achievement and performance is going to result in improvement in student grades. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Plant Services, Mr. Chris Zolber.
Good evening, President Trujillo, members of the governing board, members of cabinet. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to discuss the reimagining subcommittee of the Pathways to Success group. I just want to start and say thank you to Mr. Quintana for asking me to be a part of this subcommittee. Just as excited as Teresa is to be a part of this, I am just as excited to be a part of the reimagining portion of this whole large initiative that we're presenting to you tonight. Somebody a lot smarter than me said that a true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, it's imagination. And so I like to apply that to this initiative here. Again, I think in the order in which each subcommittee leader came up tonight kind of hopefully gives you an idea of where we're at. And so, taking a look at the reimagining piece, I'm a co-chair with our Director of Human Resources, Dr. Vic Diaz. And so we have a lot of, we're contingent, a lot of the work we're going to do is contingent on our counterparts in the other committees. We don't want to have the tail wag the dog. We want to make sure that we are approaching how we reimagine the district with a huge emphasis on our programs and our curriculum. Coming from the facilities and maintenance operations side, we want to serve the purpose of supporting new initiatives, supporting new programs, supporting curriculum. And so what I mean by that is the purpose of the reimagining phase is to take a look at and assess our facilities, assess our buildings, and then that goes even further into looking at our programs. And if there's an opportunity to expand on that, if that calls for some new construction, some renovation, my department, my team is here to support that. But a little overview of what we're looking at doing with this subcommittee is develop a master plan for the future of the school district. We have partnered up with a master plan that's going to help us align our goals and really get the ball rolling. Another portion of that is the assessment of optimal and equitable size of classes, sections in our schools. Are our schools right sized? Are we using them appropriately? Are we using them to the full functionality that they should be? We want to take a look at that. And then also we want to do an assessment of educational and program models. And that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the support that we can bring to the table on the reimagining portion. At this point, I just want to see if there's any questions so far before I move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I would like to ask, when we talk about education and program models, are we also looking at like competency models in order of like what skills of competency do we want our kids to leave once they graduate 8th grade?
That's a really good question. Can I defer that to you, Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes, I think that's a valid question. At this point, our committee hasn't investigated in that, but when we think, it ties directly back to what Ms. Mikulich was talking about as well, because when we think about the optimization of equitable learning experiences, that really does come back to what are those criteria that we expect students to leave our schools with and to matriculate through the grade levels. So as we look at programs that are multi-age bands or looking at some of the innovative programming that we might do with middle schools, we definitely will need to address that topic, and that'll be a pretty meaty topic that's going to take a lot of stakeholder involvement.
Thank you, because that leads to my next question of what is the involvement of the business community in any of these committees? Because I think it would be a good idea to ask them, like, what are they looking for in their employees? And what are we gonna do to make sure that our students are ready to be employable?
Okay,
I can go ahead, just at the, one of the roles that we're engaging with Iconico, it's really one of the partners is that we want to help us set up a plan to talk to the community. The community is both families as well as business community, and to get the input from them. It's also something that'll be taking place, with through their efforts of talking to the community and getting information from them, as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to throw this out there that I really like the idea of community schools. So do it.
Thank you, Ms. Bueno. And just, to kind of piggyback on your idea there, and what I'm talking about with supporting programs and models, I think Garfield, Dr. Weeks, you spoke to it a little bit earlier, but the garden community at Garfield, right? That was an initiative that Plant Services over the summer, we renovated the kitchen, and that was to support a grant that we received from the Mullen Foundation. So there's a good example of a partnership that the district is involved with that required some reimagining of how we're doing things. And so, on the facility side, where we had to redo the irrigation to support the planting and the harvesting and the new equipment that we got for the kitchen to redesign the kitchen and redevelop and remodel. Those are the things we're talking about when we're talking about partnerships and expanding on these programs. So that's a good point. I just kind of wanted to bring that as that hopefully that aligns with the initiative that you're saying.
To touch on that, this is Carmen Trujillo speaking. I'm loving the community school idea because my question or my thought that I need clarification on was as far as the assessment of our models, I wasn't too sure. Is that like an assessment of what we have going on now or an assessment of what's going to be best for our population of kids? I wasn't too sure, but to circle back, I remember hearing that the teacher had brought in the Mullen Foundation, just kind of like a small connection. That's kind of how it started. So it really does this telling of the community school idea, like it's just your network. It's who you know and speaking up and making those partnerships. So if I'm wrong on that, I apologize, but I do believe I asked early, I don't know, sometime in 2018 when I was campaigning, what is going on with Garfield? That's the school I went to, and I had so many questions. So one of the things I found out was that a teacher had actually initiated that whole thing. So I was really happy, I guess, to hear that the teacher can make that big of a change. That's still going on today. So
Absolutely. Any other questions? Go ahead and move on to the next slide here. So here we are looking at some of the opportunities and assessments. Again, different models that we want to look at is for our schools is an assessment of academy models. This isn't all inclusive as I go through this. There's things that could fall off of this. There's things that could be added. I like to look at this as we're still in the infancy stages of identifying opportunities and assessments. But where can we look at other schools? We're trying to get a couple of the subcommittees to go out and visit some of the neighboring school districts' academies to see what's working over there. capture some data, see if there's opportunities for us to bring that back to the subcommittee and come up with some of our own ideas. When I first joined the school district, I was always told we set the benchmark and we were the ones that surrounding school districts looked up to. And so I don't want us to get into the habit of copying other people. I want us to be innovative and carry initiatives and us setting the benchmark again. So I don't mean to go out and to copy other people's ideas. I want to set the benchmark again and raise that level of innovation again. And so with that, we're going to look at all different types of opportunities here. We're going to do an assessment of our K through 4, our 5th through 8 school models. And when I say assessment, kind of to answer your question a little further, President Trujillo, we want to see what it is now, and then we want to see what it can be in the future too. So we want to take a look at both lenses there and see what we can explore. We also want to take an assessment of our middle and junior high models. Are they where they need to be? Is this what is really working? And so that's why when I talk about the work here on the reimagining side is contingent on the 2 other subcommittees. We rely heavily on the data they're going to pull so that we can begin to make these reimagining initiatives a reality. Put these into perspective once we can gather and capture good data and figure out, what's going to work here. The list goes on. We can assess signature schools, what's working at the surrounding signature schools, and what can we take and bring into Phoenix Elementary. Where is there an opportunity to expand our before and after school programs, our pre-kindergarten services? I know that's something we've been looking at is how can we expand on those services? And so we want to consult the experts in our district, our preschool principal. I think it would be worthy of us really exploring the initiative on the experts here. I'm not the expert in pre-K, but I'm here to support any initiative that we come up with. And so I think those conversations need to happen. They will happen in the near future. And even as young as, our services from birth to 3-year-olds, what does that look like? And how can we start that capture rate? And sorry, I don't like to use the word capture, but how can we entice and bring in this age group at an early age and try to bring them into the family of Phoenix L and watch them grow and be a part of this community. I know that a lot of the stuff I talked about tonight is opportunities and future items, but in joining this subcommittee not too long ago, I would hope that the next time we meet, we'll have some tangible things to talk about that we've been doing and gathering more data and bringing some tangible things that you can see and some real work that's going on into the footwork and the folks that are part of this committee. So is there any other questions before I turn it over to Mr. McDonough?
Yeah, just on terms of the committee, have you opened up the committee too on like the previous committee, or is there a finite number of people who could be on the committee?
So right now we have a subcommittee, and that it's 2 co-chairs per subcommittee, but we are part of a larger, the Pathways to Success Committee, and I think we've got a little over 20 folks, give or take, and we meet every other month. And so essentially we're looking at this to kind of be the driving force and then bringing these ideas to the larger group and then getting the feedback and making sure that we're on the right path with the larger Pathways to Success Task Force. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Carrillo.
Yeah, however, I would like for there to be an open a doorway for people to just come in and out, or just invite business leaders, other organizations to offer insight into the sport, because we do have a lot of really great organizations in our district and businesses, to Luana's point, that can offer great feedback to a lot of the issues that we're researching on our own, because they've done this work too, that they're doing this work currently. That's all I have to offer. Thank you.
It's Carmen Trujillo again. Agreed. I'm glad you brought that up. It is really important. As far as experts are concerned, just like Ms. Bueno said, hearing from whatever trades or businesses that we do have here, we do need to know what they're looking for, what we can help build up. That, long term, that's going to be our economy. But I'm really glad to hear that you guys are looking at what other districts are doing too, because we've all had to get real innovative and look at things. And I do try and keep up on what's going on nearby. And I am always so inspired, and, I wish that we have some of those things. So I'm really glad to hear that it's more of a collaborative thing. Because I just imagine sometimes that administration meets with each other and has friends. So I'm really excited to hear about that and excited that Ms. Bueno brought the point up of talking to our business owners out here, what they're looking for. So thank you both.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm impressed that you actually heard me say it in like capture. Like I don't expect anyone to be. I love the birth to three. I think Dr. Diaz has been talking about it for a long time too. So, Laura Diaz. So that's fantastic. And I absolutely think that we have some capacity to do a sliding fee scale within our district. So that's wonderful. A question I've had for a long time is legally or I don't, what can we use our school sites for? Like, what are the bounds? Because I feel like we're still not really getting it here. We have to go to the root cause. So if that is that there is now a resource center on all of our campuses, or that one of our campuses works as a laundromat or whatever it is, you know, like part of the campus, or can we provide housing on some of our space? Do we have land that we can sell for housing? All of those kind of questions come to mind in this as we're looking at what plant services does and our sites themselves. And then just, I love that we want to raise the benchmark or be someone to look at. However, Arizona struggles. So I hope that we are looking worldwide. And I love that we are coming together to have these conversations and reimagine ourselves. But I think that there are states and countries that do things really, really well. So we might not need to spend so much energy trying to, I don't want to recreate the wheel. I just, it's when there are other models that are definitely working. We will obviously need to make things fit for our community, and we need to involve them and all of that. But we do know that there are states and countries with similar populations, things like that, that we can learn from. And I know I heard someone say something about research, so I know that we're pulling in things from everywhere, but I just don't want us to recreate everything just because.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the initiative isn't to recreate the wheel. I think I love how you put that. It is to get inspired. And I think, you take a look at what Creighton did with their academy. They looked at school models in overseas in Europe, what were they doing? They implemented it in their new academy. And so those are the things that we want to do. It's not so much about reinventing the wheel. It's about being inspired and saying, okay, this is what we have, right? And so how can we improve on that? And what programs are there to take these initiatives higher and explore new opportunities? So yeah.
I'll just speak up one more time. Carmen Trujillo. Dr. Reed raises another point that just made me think of, I know I've heard some alumni stories that our campuses used to be like hubs for the community. They were open late, the fields were used, staff were on site. I know we don't live in those times. We're living in really different times, but I do fully believe that our schools are a hub, even if they're not as accessible as they used to be. So I hope that's being looked at as well, because if it's not churches, it's schools that are the glue, especially in I hate using the word poverty stricken, but in our very low income neighborhoods, like we need to be the glue for families. So I'm really glad all these perspectives were brought up, because I forget about that sometimes. And when we used to be able to do movie nights and, just different things that you do after hours, because your school is a welcoming place. So I just got really excited listening to that and then having those thoughts. So thank you again.
All right, well, with that, I will turn that back over to Mr. Quintana. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank the folks that presented today, Chris, Linda, Teresa, and great job presenting. As you can see, we have a great team put together here that's becoming kind of part of the steering committee of the task force here, and as well as again, they have also co-chairs that are helping them out as well. Alicia Selvas, Nick Lodato, and Dr. Vickies as well. They're part of the steering committee. And also wanted to remind you that there's another presentation that's attached to or part of your packet that has updated information regarding enrollment that you can look at it based on the most recent enrollment numbers that we put in there, and that's also impacting our approach to this project. And also I want to thank Nick for updating information on the attendance information on the charts. So him and his shop put that information together. So thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate it. And with that, we are very happy to say that we have selected a couple of partners that are going to be working with us on three fronts. One is to help us basically set up the master planning process and help us, have this group, including the involvement of the community, as many staff as possible, and so forth, the business community. And so we have engaged Think Smart to provide that master planning process for us in engagement over the next several months. That's also going to be doing the assessment of the capacity of the schools, not just from a physical standpoint, but also from a programmatic standpoint. So that's something else that they'll be doing as well, is they'll be conducting an assessment of the capacity study for each of the schools. And also they're already working with us on getting things geared up for the planning process that we want to explain also. That's going to happen here shortly with that we're going to begin a particular process that we want to follow, and also get your input in that as well. But they want to introduce first individual that we're engaging with, that's going to help us with the community engagement on community, on communication, getting feedback and so forth over the next several months as we work through this process. And so Iconico, you probably remember Luis Avila, that he's going to be heading up that that part of this whole initiative. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. He wanted to be here tonight, but he has an out of town retreat that he's having his staff involved in, and he couldn't make it back in time. So, but again, he's going to be involved with us, for the next several months on this project. And then we also selected Think Smart to do the master plan component and the facility assessment. And Molly Smith, that's here today, she's going to talk a little bit about her background, as well as talk about developing a process that we're going to follow as we move forward on this initiative. So with that, Molly, if you wouldn't mind.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for having me tonight. I'm just getting started with the process. You can see from your excellent staff and how much work they've already been doing. There is an enormous amount of research that they've already been doing. You can see from the diagram. Well, first I'll start a little bit. I'll introduce myself. I am a facility master planner. I work with districts all over the country. I've been working some 25 years now, all over the country with different districts. And really what my job will be is to bring everyone together, to strategize, to prioritize, to focus, really being that person who is the facilitator, helping people narrow down what they're doing. Right now, as you heard from all the committees, there are an enormous amount of ideas, and they're all great. And so what we're going to want to do in this first cycle, you can see up on the diagram, in the next 6 to 8 months, we're going to want to focus into our first cycle of ideas from all the committees. We're going to want to focus with the task force on what they'll be working on in each of the various workshops that we'll have.
one of the things that happens when you work with large groups and work with your community is that you can tend to lose focus if you're kind of all over the board. So what we want to do is we want to start out with an identity statement. We want to look at the community. What capacity do we have in the community, in our schools, to do the things we want to do? We want to look at our aspirations. That's where we'll be bringing in all the business and parents and some of those ideas that you've already been mentioning. Iconoco is going to be great in helping us with some of those focus groups. We have the Hanover contract that we can do some surveys with as well. We'll be really working on prioritizing, because if you're going to go looking at doing solutions, right? Let's say we get down to next year and you say, hey, we want to call for a bond, or we want to create new programs, or whatever you want to do, that you're actually looking at solutions, then we want prioritization of that. Obviously, we wouldn't go to the community with some large idea that we couldn't fund, right? And then we want to put that into a plan where we start a cycle. Now, the 3 committees that have been talking tonight will be ongoing. Their work is going to be ongoing throughout, and it won't end, in one cycle. It'll keep going. So I would expect that this pathways to success would be something that would go cycle to cycle. So you would start out with your vision, and then you would prioritize what you want to do, and then you would put the funds to doing that. So that's what we're really going to work on. I'm just new to the group, so I'm learning everything they're doing. Of course, I'm taking in all of the information and thinking about where we can bring in Iconoco as well in our process. So with that, I think I pretty much covered everything. Team? Okay. They're saying yes. So right now we're kind of, our schedule is that we, this large group is 28 people, 25 people. And it's not like it's an inclusive group, nobody can come in there. We can incorporate more. Obviously, it could get up to 60 or so people, starts to get really unwieldy, so we're going to keep it in a balance. But those group meetings will be very well defined. We'll say, we'll have work for them to do and get done in those meetings. And then our ongoing committees will be creating the research that feeds those meetings, so we can get something done in that work time. Those meetings will be about every 5 weeks. So we expect the first one to be happening here in a few weeks after we get some research that we can feed into that first meeting. And then we'll go on with that schedule. So we're going to set that up shortly.
I'm sorry if I can add to as well. So we've had this task force meetings the last several months, every 5 to 6 weeks. So far they've been on Zoom. As well on Zoom, it's only as effective, as some of its limitations. So we're gonna start meeting in person, starting with our next meetings, and we'd like to be able to set aside at least 2 or 3 hours for us to get together and talk through things, instead of just rushing through a particular agenda. We want the task force meeting to be more interactive and more looking at the different ideas that we all have and share information back and forth, as we go through. But that's one thing that is changing, is that we want to have these meetings in person, going forward.
Yes, what we found is that, if we can have in-person meetings, that works really well. Obviously, everybody who's been on a Zoom meeting with however many people on there, it gets hard. You can do it, but it's harder than if we're in person. And so one of the jobs that I have will be to focus us and do some exercises to really get the best out of our group. When we meet in person, we'll probably be meeting 2-3 hours, something like that. If we have teaching staff, we'll have them come in. I think my initial schedule is saying that we're going to be on on their half days or something like that. So we're working that out, but that will give them a chance to come in and really spend some time, especially if they're parents. We'd like to have them as well. So with that, I think I'm open to questions about the process. I understand the board members will not be part of the task force, correct? So that's why it's really important to see you all every once in a while and get your feedback as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that changed in the laws related to involvement on committees, is that this committee, so we'll be making recommendations and, in some cases to cabinet, in some cases to the board. And so we have to have a separation of responsibilities and one thing that we not able to have now is that membership of the governing board, on the committees. But obviously, we're gonna, we want to get you involved and provide you feedback, on especially on recommendations, because there's probably going to be some things that we want to recommend that we need your approval on and your feedback on. So those things we'll be bringing back to the board, and also just with regular updates as well that then we'll provide to you.
And I have been taking copious notes tonight when I heard your comments on community schools and new models and so forth. And those are definitely things we'll be exploring, those ideas we'll be exploring. I have worked with neighboring districts and putting in some new models in their schools, like Creighton Academy or Creighton Schools. And it's a similar process when you start to change a model or add a new model into your school district, like you mentioned, looking at what other people are doing and not really reinventing the wheel, but seeing what's working for others is going to be something important we're going to have to look at as well.
Well, I just want to open myself up for any clarification, anything you want to talk about. We can't be, more than 2 board members in a space at a given time with things, but I do believe all of us are very accessible. If we wanted to designate, 2 board members that just are your go-to people, like, please know that's a definite possibility.
Okay, fantastic.
And I just wanted to also ask what, as far as like your experience with our community down here, what does that look like, and what, I guess, yeah, maybe just what's your experience like with our district boundaries, I guess.
Oh, gosh, well, I've worked with some of your neighboring districts. I've never worked with Phoenix Elementary School District, but have worked with Phoenix High School District. One interesting thing that I've mentioned to the committee, in fact, is you mentioned talking to business. That's a very important idea. We do have businesses within this area that are going to drive everything for us as educators, right? We're feeding them the employees, right? But also Phoenix High School District has done some important initiatives that I think are worthy of looking at as well, like their bioscience and coding academy. So how do we feed those, and how do we develop the pathways for our students there? I think it'll be important to get their input for that. You have some issues that are very similar to your neighbor Creighton. I've been working with them. They're gentrifying in the north, more property in the south. They've kind of got this, going on. One of the things I think that they're doing that would be really interesting for us is they are taking the community school model very seriously, that every community has to have, kind of a school crafted for them to meet their particular needs. We may want to look at something like that. Obviously, these are just ideas, and they're not solutions at all, but we have very talented people on the committee that can help with that, and I think it may be something we want to look at. I also think that the district has some very successful schools. Your Montessori is a very successful school, and your garden school. It's, these models are things where I say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Try to build on what you're really doing well. And sounds like you're already doing some things really well. So you're not alone in the capture rate dilemma. Even as far over as Queen Creek on the other side of the valley has a problem with capture rate. So what does that mean? Who knows? It's a combination of factors, and we'll look into that and see what that means. I'll be doing the capacity studies on your school to kind of see, okay, what does each school have in terms of, raw, availability of space and land and what it can be used for and all of that kind of stuff. I think the question came up tonight about what can we use our schools for? So that's a good question for us to explore. If you look at the birth to 3 age group, we would have to make some changes to facilities, per the health codes. But, we can look at all of that as well as we go along. So lots of good things here. You really have a lot of good raw material to start with. It's not horrible or anything like that, so. Other thoughts or questions?
Thank you very much for answering that. I'm really excited to see what takes place.
Yeah, and I'll make the comment for your facilities stuff that you have, as far as what I can see in the district, you have very well maintained facilities. Which means a lot, because we're not starting from negative, right? Yeah, we're starting from positive, so that's a good thing.
Do you have a sense of what it costs to have a district that serves the number of similar number of students and has highly achieving students? Like that is my question.
What does it
because-
cost per
Yeah,
student?
right. I mean, because we can sit here all night long and say we want to do these things, but we're still in Arizona.
Right.
And we can look at other countries and we can look at, but so it would.
It's more than what we get.
Well, so I mean, it would be helpful to me, and I've asked several times now, just what does Shaw spend to do what they do, or what does Magnet spend to do what they do, and that is inclusive of the community resources that they bring in, because some of our schools bring in much higher community resources. So what does it cost to do well? And then, I mean, it almost makes sense to start there, because if we are never going to be there, then what's, if we don't have access to that number, and I think that we do, I hope that we do, or have means to get there, but if we don't know what the number is, it's hard for my brain to kind of process that.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a complex question.
I
you
know that it is,
Yeah,
and that's what
yeah.
Dr. Weeks always tells me, it's very complex, we could spend a very long time figuring this out, but also.
I mean, and I'm sure Dr. Weeks and Martine have seen many studies out there where, I think you were mentioning earlier that people have always been trying to find the sweet spot. You know, how big should the school be so that the money gets spent on the kids and not spent on all the other things? And that's a question I hear at districts all around the country. Everybody's got a different answer, unfortunately. Obviously, smaller schools end up spending more of their pie chart of money on the facility than they do on the programs. And that's why people kind of look for a sweet spot, like 500 students, 600, I don't know what people come up with, but I think that's maybe what we need to look at for us. Where's our sweet spot, and find it, because it may not be all about money. It may be about program and support for our children as well. And we decided, to go smaller because we want to support our kids more. So it's really complicated. I hate to give you that answer, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I do know that Arizona obviously doesn't get the type of money per student that some of the other states do. So,
Okay. My other question was, I think when we initially started Pathways to Success, I thought there was an end to it, and it does not look like there is really an end to it. So my question is, are we going to get to where we need to be? I don't want to be, I was a parent who was caught off guard by a 3-school closure announcement several years ago. And I do not want to be in that situation again, where we're like a third of the way through and we're like, look, we don't have money. And we need to make these decisions right now, even though we're only a third of the way through. So how long can we do this process before we say go?
and you may have another answer than I do. But I had suggested to the group that we put an end to the first cycle of this work, because I don't think that just keep going on and on and on is gonna help the district, So what I'm gonna focus on is trying to get each of the committees and our task force to commit to priorities. And then we will have that first set of priorities in 6 to 8 months, probably next, by the end of the school year. But the 3 ongoing committees will continue their work, as I understand it, because that is ongoing work. So that's what I would like to see as a strategic planner myself, because I think you're gonna wanna make some decisions at that point. By the end of the school year, you may have facility decisions to make, program decisions, I'm not sure what, but they'll probably entail money, and you'll be wanting to make some decisions, and so we need to have some recommendations to you by then. I don't personally see, from what I've seen in the district, that we're gonna come out and say close 5 schools. I don't think that, and I don't know that we would say close any schools at this point. So that's where we're at with that, but we'll know more as we go along, obviously. Dr. Weeks, did you have another?
Well,
on that?
I always have a lot to say, right? But sometimes it's prudent to stay silent so that we can hear all the voices in the room. So I want to first thank everyone who presented tonight. And I want to appreciate your enthusiasm and your sense of urgency, right? Ironically, there's some strong correlation between our ASU prep conversation and this Pathways to Success conversation that kind of grew out of your questions, right? As you begin to put these puzzle pieces together in your own mind, right? What can we do? What kind of resources are we going to allocate and all the rest of this stuff? The benefit to Pathways to Success is that it helps us to maintain our commitment to risk taking. The only way that you can really truly imagine is to set up a culture that really begins with this governing board of supporting risk, right? And to allow the folks within the district to really be autonomous and to dream and to feel comfortable, to be able to express those dreams and to feel supported and being able to realize those dreams. And so it really is a function of this particular board to really hold us accountable to that high level of imagination, which I think is really cool, right? Pathways by its very nature really says to me that there's multiple roads that we're going to be traveling down. And that you're right, that a pathway never really ends, but there are milestones that need to be met. And there are obligations and some tangible outcomes that need to be achieved. One of which is, gee, how much money are we going to have around here next year to be able to support the districts? And how do ESSER funds and O funds and override funds and all of these funds come together to be able to tell the story of sustaining the things that we want to get done, right? Can we continue to live within our means? That's really the $20 question that everybody wants to know, right? And so part of that is, what does it cost to operate our schools? What does it cost to operate our schools well? And the good news is that with the advanced AFR site-based reporting, we have probably some of the best answers that we've ever had. So when you and Reggie come by to talk to Martine and I and Damon, we'll have that information for you. I would say on average, as kind of pasta on the wall, it's always been about $2,000 more per student. That's been kind of my dirty math average. But let's take a look at the reports and see where they come out to. In terms of what the teams have been able to put together, the things that, Molly, we expect you to do. My question to you, Molly, is, and to you, Mr. Quintana, is as we gear for our bond election next year, how much of this process will be able to feed the capital plan? 6 or 8 months is going to be far too late to be able to put a pamphlet together for bond literature for next year. In fact, January is almost too late. You almost need to have a capital plan now in order to put a bond pamphlet together for a cycled election next year. And if we're not ready to go to bond next year, then do we have the capital resources to carry us for a year to maintain our facilities at this high level so that we can gear up and have the capital plan ready for the following year, which is not necessarily bad because that would be an off election year. Right?
Yeah.
So we will win the M&O override that's out on the street now. And we do have the full support of the community and the expectation that our district will be, that we will maintain our good neighbor positioning. So to hear more talk about community schools and supports for the community and things like that, I think that's all very good discourse. I also think that we also need to continue to be mindful of the students who attend our schools from outside of our attendance boundaries, and how do we provide those community supports to them. So, Chris, you're absolutely right. We're never at the back end of this. We've been at the front end of this thing for 150 years, and our position has never changed. We've always been number one. We're going to continue to be number one. And so that's why the heat is on. That's why the pressure is on. That's why the stressors are there, because it's our obligation to stay number one, not to sit on our laurels, not to lose our sense of urgency, to do all of the things that we know are right for the betterment of our whole society and for all students. So I'm very proud of what I've seen here tonight. And I'm very excited about where we're going with all of this. Probably now more than ever. And so with your support and the support of the community to help us to be a more nimble district, a more imaginative, a more risk-taking district, and not always playing exactly inside our sandbox is the best place to be. I told a teacher the other day, I said, rules don't always provide solutions. Rules are rules. They're there for a reason. But rules don't always provide solutions to and provide the answers to the questions that we're seeking. Sometimes we have to carve our own way. And this is exactly what this exercise is doing for us. And it's invigorating, it's exciting. It's almost 10 o'clock, it's exhausting, but it's well worth the time spent. And I couldn't, as a superintendent of this district, I could not be more proud than I am in what I'm envisioning this district will become. So for that, I'm grateful to you, and to everybody out there who's going to help us make this thing the reality that it will be. And so, Molly, I don't know if you're going to help us build a capital plan or not, but someone's going to have to get on there.
Well, I could obviously give you a capital plan by January, but it might not be based on community consensus.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. So we may have to look at planning.
We may have to think about that, but I think before you go to your community with those ideas, we need to be well researched. That's just my impression. Yeah.
And we are working on capital plan already as it works. That's something that Chris is also heading up right now. He's already talking to some of the schools about some things that, they like to dream about when it comes to capital plan. So we are beginning the process. So we do expect to be ready by January. Obviously, the more work we do on the pathways, it'll help with the process, but it's not going to slow us down from coming up with the capital plan that if we want to go to a bond election next year, we'll be ready.
Excellent. Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Any other questions that you have for me or anybody in the group before we? While you're thinking about it, I want to again thank Teresa, Linda, Chris, thanks so much for a great presentation. And thank you, Molly, for joining us today. I'm looking forward to working with you on establishing this whole process and helping us come up with some really good plans and ideas.
Absolutely. I want to echo that, Mr. Pimpana. Thank you, everybody, for the information you brought tonight. It really, we talked about census data earlier, and in a conversation this week, somebody said, instead of just focusing on the numbers and, what it looks like, we're going to get this clear picture. Like, how about envisioning, like, being able to measure our impact when we're functioning, like full speed, you know, instead of just kind of, you know, making sure we collect all the numbers. So I do feel like Phoenix is in a position to set our community up for success so we can actually have a bigger impact, you know, in the future as far as census data is concerned, and that's what I'm really excited about.
Well, thank you. I think you're right.
So I don't have any more questions. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in order for us to be able to move on to section B, and adjourn the meeting, anybody that would like to label their board meetings, requests or future agenda items, now would be a great time to give those.
I had just a couple, I would like more information on our mastery-based grading. I heard that tonight and was interested in what that is. And then a board update on meals for quarantine students. And then possibly, receive and discuss and take possible action on our COVID mitigation plan, hopefully before we go to winter break. Just knowing that our, fingers crossed, my son already has a preemptive appointment for his vaccine. So knowing that, hoping that that is coming out, I would like us to be able to talk about that so our teachers can plan, our schools can plan if we need to make changes before the winter semester starts. I think that was all I had. Thank you.
I'm gonna ask a quick question, Dr. Vink. Have you received information you were interested in regarding our transportation department? And if not, maybe include that.
Yes, just an update regarding the transportation. Whether the staffing of our transportation department, and then if there's any additional companies we're contracting with, incentives we're providing so that we can provide that, would be great. Thank you.
That was the main one I wanted to make sure we brought up, because I have also heard where other districts are having transportation issues, so I just wanted to get that out on record. Anybody else have anything?
So I met with the bus drivers, oh, I don't know, maybe, well, right before I left. And so the bus driver situation is tight. We have, you know, Mondo and the mechanics are climbing in the buses and they're driving routes. Sometimes the students are delayed on their home routes because of some transportation bus driver shortages. Not necessarily bus drivers leaving the district, but you know, calling in sick and just not having the additional support, right? With CDL drivers and things like that. It's not at a catastrophic point. And so the team is coming together like probably every other transportation yard in the district is coming together to be able to get kids to and from school, cutting into some of the very few field trips that have been approved. Sometimes we don't always have transportation available for that. And so the kind of report that we can provide to you maybe would include kind of the story from Armando on how you doing, or maybe Dr. Vink, maybe you and Mr. Quintana, I know, Ms. Bueno, you and Mr. Quintana, we're gonna go down to the bus yard and maybe Dr. Vink hang around with Mr. Quintana and have a conversation with Mondo and get some firsthand knowledge from the bus drivers and mechanics and Mondo down there on what's actually going on. That's really the best place to hear the story of how they feel and what they think they can do to keep kids, on the buses. The other thing is that I met with the child nutrition managers this morning, and I inquired about food shortages, things like that. And so, there's some real concerns, but there's some solution-driven, very passionate child nutrition managers and leadership down in the child nutrition department that are thinking way outside the box to make sure that all students have breakfast and lunch. Those meals might be a little creative from time to time. But child nutrition managers are climbing into the trucks where the Shamrock delivery guys are delivering because the new drivers don't know the products sometimes that they're delivering. And so support staff in and around the plant services yard goes above and beyond every single day to do their very best. And the best way to find out those stories is to go down there and hear them for yourself. There's just some phenomenal things that's going on. But there are some challenges that we face that other districts are facing. But we got some pretty solid solution-driven folks out there too that really should be appreciated and recognized for their hard work because it's pretty amazing stuff. So if you're interested in that, we can certainly set something up.
I'd love to. I think though that I always come from a place of tell me what the problem is. So that's where the report comes from. And then I can do a receive, discuss, possible action to move forward. So really, I don't need a list of the problems. I want you to bring me things that we can do to make it better. If it's an incentive to pay them more, to hire more, if we need to contract out to different things. There's now a company that hires drivers like Lyft that take kids to school and schools are contracting with them. So that's where it comes from. I absolutely want to go and meet our bus drivers, but I also want to be sitting here and have an agenda item that will help me help them. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I don't disagree with that. I think, Mr. Quintana can go down there and he can work with Chris and we can certainly put something together, a list of ideas and options the board can vote on. But a lot of those great ideas come from the yard. And so I want to make sure that we're not making top-down recommendations, that we're really hearing a voice from the folks who are actually doing the work. So, and I'm sure that's the practice anyway. So we're happy to set the board up with the kind of supports that will really drive productivity to the folks that need it most.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, so Armando did provide me an update on Monday with the idea that we want to provide a board update for the board on Monday. Unfortunately, I didn't get it quite on time, but I will be doing a board update with Armando's help and also Chris this coming Monday. And also, obviously welcoming if you want to do a tour also, but and so in that update, we will provide information solutions that we can, that we think we can put in place. And some things that may not require board action, and those are things that Chris and I can take action on if we can put those things in place. And if there is something that might require board action, then we'll bring that to the board, at a future meeting.
Hearing nothing further, Matt, we have let me ask, are there any other comments, questions? Wonderful. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Alicia being so moved.
Do we have a second?
Jessica Bueno, second.
All in favor of adjourning our work study session at 10:04 p.m.
Aye.
Aye. That the motion. Good evening. Thank you guys for joining us tonight.